Waves of dizziness hit me as I woke up to intense crying and yelling outside. I opened my eyes, gasping for air, fully expecting to be dead under a bridge from a severe illness. Instead, I found myself lying in a cold, dilapidated mud brick house on a straw mat. An old almanac on the table revealed the impossible date, January 1, 1960. I had been reborn 30 years into the past, returning to my old rural home in the north. In my previous life, I was weak and submissive. My biased family bled me dry, snatching away my job opportunities and tricking me out of my hard-earned money. Because of my spineless nature, I failed to protect my wife, Sun Weiwei, and our daughter, Yi Yi. They suffered endlessly, leading to my wife's eventual suicide and my own lonely death in extreme poverty. But heaven had given me a second chance, and I swore never to let them bully my family again. I rushed into the courtyard where my grandmother, Zhang Guixiang, and my eldest sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, were harshly berating Weiwei. Li Qinfen accused my wife of stealing pork lard dregs and raised her hand to strike her. Little Yi Yi tried to protect her mother, crying out that it was actually Big Aunt who stole the food. Instead of listening, Li Qinfen threatened to beat Yi Yi too. I stepped in immediately, roaring at Li Qinfen to stop her from laying a finger on my family. In my past life on this exact day, Li Qinfen was the actual thief who blamed Weiwei to cover her own tracks. Back then, I foolishly sided with my family and hit my own wife, starting the tragic path to her downfall. This time, I stood firm against Li Qinfen's shameless denial and my grandmother's favoritism. To clear my wife's name once and for all, I sent Weiwei to fetch the old village chief and his sharp-nosed hunting dog, a Huang. When the village chief arrived, Weiwei breathed on A Huang first, and the dog showed no reaction. Confident that a little grease would go undetected, Li Qinfen arrogantly breathed on the dog. A Huang immediately barked with excitement and began licking her mouth. The village chief confirmed the truth. A Huang smelled the meat on Li Qinfen, proving without a doubt that she was the real thief. Exposed by the village chief's dog, my eldest sister-in-law Li Qinfen finally admitted to eating the pork cracklings. However, she dismissed it as a minor issue and tried to brush it off with my grandmother's support. When my grandmother tried to dismiss the crowd, I refused to let it go. When she wanted me to threaten my wife and deny her food, it was a big deal. Now that she was caught, a few words were supposed to be enough. I openly called out my grandmother's blatant favoritism and confronted the entire family. My eldest brother, Chen Shan, tried to step in and intimidate me, threatening to beat me up. In my past life, I would have cowered. But now, I stood my ground, staring him down and daring him to make a move. The commotion attracted a crowd of curious villagers outside our courtyard, making my family look foolish. Unable to handle the public exposure and my newfound sharpness, my brother backed down. Then my irresponsible father, Chen Donggen, stepped out to scold me for making a scene over a bit of food. I mocked him directly, asking if he just wanted me to quietly earn work points so he could drink and gamble. I demanded a formal apology from Li Qinfen to my wife and daughter to settle the matter. Li Qinfen threw a dramatic tantrum on the ground, refusing to apologize to a younger family member. But with the gathering crowd taking my side and my father wanting to save face, my grandmother and brother urged her to just give a fake apology. Gritting her teeth, Li Qinfen half-heartedly admitted she had misunderstood. Afterward, my father casually ordered everyone to hurry up and make breakfast because they were hungry. My wife had always been forced to prepare every single meal for this ungrateful household, even right after giving birth. Watching them expect to be served like masters, after everything they did, I sneered inwardly, knowing their free ride was over. When my wife, Sun Weiwei, turned to go prepare breakfast, I stopped her. I openly challenged why she had to slave away for everyone, while my eldest sister-in-law got to sleep in. When my grandmother and my angry father, Chen Donggen, tried to browbeat and threaten me into line, I declared that I was done with all of them. I turned to the old village chief, Chen Zhaid, and asked him to officially witness a family division. In my past life, this leech-like family bled me dry until I died of kidney disease under a bridge, while my wife committed suicide and my daughter died of illness. I was determined not to repeat that nightmare. Despite my grandmother's refusal and my father's violent anger, the village chief backed me up, pointing out that it was fair and reasonable for me to separate. Seeing no way out, my father furiously agreed to split the household, believing we would fail on our own. My grandmother and sister-in-law tried to give us practically nothing, just a worn quilt, broken bowls, and a bag of mixed flour. Then my younger brother, Chen Hai, and my grandmother demanded I give up my half of our room for him. I didn't care about their petty squabbling over the room. I only asked for an iron pot and a felling axe. With the village chief documenting everything, the family division was finalized. When asked where my family would stay, I chose an abandoned cave at the foot of the mountain rather than taking the village chief's storage shed. Though covered in cobwebs, it was spacious enough to be cleaned up and lived in. Once we moved our few belongings to the cave, I looked at my beautiful, hard-working wife and pulled her into a tight embrace. I apologized deeply for past mistreatment and swore to give her and our daughter a good life from now on. Wei Wei blushed, sensing the change in me and feeling hopeful for our future. As I pulled my crying daughter Yi Yi into my arms and kissed her, she pouted and told me she was hungry for pork lard dregs too. Looking at the few hard-steamed buns and small bag of oilless flour we had been given, my heart ached for my malnourished wife and daughter. I grabbed my hatchet and made my way into the cold, dense forest, determined to bring home some meat. Though I had no shotgun, I sharpened a wooden stick to use as a spear, relying on my skills as a former hunter. After searching the frost-covered terrain, I found fresh droppings and scattered a handful of flour as bait for a wild rabbit. I waited motionless on the freezing ground until past noon. Just as a large rabbit finally appeared and I threw my spear, a sudden scream echoed through the woods. The sudden noise startled the rabbit, causing my spear to miss completely. Frustrated, I followed the voice and saw a young woman running frantically from an aggressive wild boar with sharp tusks. I shouted for her to climb a tree, which bought her a brief moment of safety before she fell and bumped into me in a panic. Protecting her, I stood my ground as the wild boar charged us again. Waiting for the exact right moment, I plunged my makeshift spear directly into the boar's neck. As it thrashing wildly, I drew my hatchet and struck its forehead, killing the beast instantly. As I sat on the ground catching my breath, a group of urban youths ran up. One suspicious young man named Zhang Hao immediately accused me of being a mountain spy. The girl, Zhou Lili, quickly defended me, explaining that I had just saved her life from the wild boar. Before her group hurried away, she told me that she worked at the Wuxiang state-owned restaurant and invited me to look her up in the city so she could treat me to a meal. Though I had originally only set out to catch a simple rabbit, I hauled the massive wild boar onto my heel, shoulder, and started heading down the mountain, thrilled that my family would finally have real meat to eat. When I returned to the cleaned-up cave dwelling at sunset, my wife, Sun Weiwei, was deeply anxious. Seeing me covered in blood, she panicked until I dropped a 200-jin wild boar onto the ground. She was stunned that I had hunted such a huge animal. I teased her playfully, and my daughter Yi Yi cheered, thrilled that we would finally have meat to eat every day. Wei Wei asked how we should divide the boar and brought up my sister-in-law's family. I made it crystal clear that since we had separated, we owed them nothing. We would keep the meat, dry what was left into cured meat, and give 10 jin to the helpful village chief. Wei Wei quickly carved the boar, and I took a 10 jin portion over to the village chief's house. Village Chief Chen Jide was shocked and scolded me for risking my life, telling me to take the meat back. I insisted, thanking him for his help, and used the opportunity to borrow his hunting rifle and 20 bullets. He agreed on the condition that I take good care of it. Meanwhile, back at the old house, Li Qinfen was miserable, having to cook all 3 meals herself. In the past, Wei Wei handled all the grueling chores without complaint. Overwhelmed by the work, Li Qinfen realized how much easier her life was with Wei Wei around. She approached my grandmother, pointing out that with the paltry supplies we were given, my family was probably starving in the cave. She argued that bringing us back would save them from losing valuable work points. Grandmother agreed, so Li Qinfen dumped the cooking duty on her and ran off. Scheme in mind, Li Qinfen decided not to apologize or invite us back herself. Instead, she decided to send her young son to fetch us, believing it would force us to return while keeping her pride intact. My wife, Sun Weiwei, rendered lard from the wild boar fat and stewed a hot pot of meat, bones, wilted radish, and potato inside our cave. Because our cave sat isolated at the end of the village, the delicious aroma did not attract unwanted neighbors. When I walked back inside, Weiwei hung my heavy coat while our daughter Yi Yi brushed the snow off my legs. My heart felt warm, and I sat down with my family to enjoy our well-deserved meal. Suddenly, 5-year-old Chen Guangtao barged into the cave. Sent by his mother, Li Qinfen, to order Weiwei back to cook, he smelled the meat and immediately demanded a bowl. When Weiwei instinctively went to share, I stopped her. I knew if I gave in, my family would use the child to leech off us endlessly. I also remembered how this spoiled nephew bullied my daughter and eventually kicked me out in my past life. Denied the meat, Guangtao threw a tantrum and tried to snatch the bowl from the table. I easily held him back by his head. He then tried to push Yi Yi, but I pulled her out of harm's way just in time. Defeated, Guangtao ran off, yelling that he was going home to tell his mother. I squatted down to comfort Yi Yi, encouraging her to stand up to him if he ever tried to bully her again. Yi Yi bravely promised to grow up fast to protect us, and we returned to our meal, determined to build a better life together. Meanwhile, Guangtao ran home crying and lied to Li Qinfen and my grandmother, claiming we beat him and refused to share our meat. Furious that we were enjoying a feast, while they had none, my grandmother fumed with anger. Seizing the opportunity, Li Qinfen urged my grandmother to demand that I hand over the meat to honor her as the family elder. Back at the main house, my grandmother Zhang Guixiang decided that all the meat I brought back belonged to her. She planned to freeze the meat, have Li Qinfen make lard dregs for her grandson, and force my wife, Sun Weiwei, back to do all the cooking. My third brother, Chen Hai, overheard their conversation and insisted on joining them to demand the meat. Meanwhile, inside our cave, Weiwei fed our daughter Yi while avoiding the meat herself to save it for us. I insisted that she eat too, reminding her that taking care of herself was just as important. Just as we were enjoying our meal, hostile shouting erupted outside the cave. I stepped outside to find my grandmother, my eldest brother Chen Shan, Li Qinfen, and Chen Hai arriving to demand all our food. Chen Shan coldly lectured me about honoring our elders, but I reminded him that we had already officially separated. My grandmother threw a typical tantrum on the ground, threatening to stay outside and freeze to death if I didn't hand over the meat. I indifferently told her to go ahead and freeze if she wanted to. Li Qinfen urged my brothers to push past me and storm inside to take everything. Seeing them move, I grabbed a rusty old machete and stood my ground at the doorway. When my grandmother accused me of threatening my own family, I called them shameless beggars who refused to work for their own food. I warned them that the blade had no eyes and I would show no mercy. When Chen Shan tried to rush me anyway, I swung the machete right at him. Terrified, he scrambled backward, lost his balance, and crashed hard onto the ground, wetting his pants in fear. Chen Hai panicked and ran away immediately. As Li Qinfen rushed over to check on her husband, she gagged from the foul smell, prompting an embarrassed and furious Chen Shan to slap her across the face. Brandishing my axe, I made it clear to my abusive family that if they ever came back to cause trouble, I would strike them down without hesitation. Trembling with fear, they helped my humiliated eldest brother, Chen Shan, and my grandmother leave. Once they were gone, I dropped the axe, exhausted. My wife, Sun Weiwei, rushed out with our daughter, Yi Yi, asking if I was hurt. I took Yi Yi into my arms and made a pinky promise with her that I would always protect our family from bad guys. As night fell, I lit a fire in the stove using gathered tree branches, warming up the cave's heated brick bed so my family wouldn't freeze. Though my grandmother had only given us one tattered cotton quilt, Weiwei insisted on giving it to me and Yi Yi. I refused and made sure my wife and daughter were bundled up, sharing what little warmth we had. That night, lying on the warm bed after cutting ties with my leeching family, I planned our future. Instead of relying on spring work points, I decided to use my hunting rifle to set traps on the mountain and trade game, on the county black market for money and supplies. Looking at me in the moonlight, Weiwei whispered her hope that this wasn't a dream, and that I would stay this caring person forever. The next morning, I woke up to find the spot beside me empty. Panicked that Wei Wei might have fallen into depression like in my previous life, I rushed outside. Relief washed over me when I saw her carrying a bundle of firewood up the mountain path. Seeing her red, freezing hands, I immediately took the heavy bundle and held her hands to warm them. I scolded her firmly, warning her never to venture up the mountain alone in winter because of dangerous wild beasts. She nodded obediently, promising to be careful. Shortly after we returned to the cave, a knock sounded at the door. It was Aunt Manhwa, the wife of a fellow villager. She explained that her husband had heard about our separation and sent her over with 2 steamed buns to ensure we wouldn't go hungry. I remembered how Uncle Jiqiang and Aunt Manhwa had saved me from starvation in my previous life. So, when Aunt Manhwa brought us 2 steamed buns, I gladly accepted them and swore to repay their kindness. Later that evening, my wife, Sun Wei Wei, and I planned to secretly bring them some meat once darkness fell. After eating a hearty breakfast with Wei Wei and my daughter Yi Yi, I told them to stay warm inside while I headed into the snow-covered mountains with my hunting rifle, long spear, and kindling knife. The winter landscape was frozen and white. Using my kindling knife, I spent an hour digging a small pit in the frozen ground, intending to set a hunting trap. Continuing deeper into the forest, I suddenly spotted 2 pheasants behind a pile of dry grass. I threw my long spear, pinning the first pheasant to the ground, and quickly shot the second one with my hunting rifle as it tried to fly off. Checking behind the dry grass where the birds had been hiding, I discovered a nest containing 5 wild eggs. I carefully wrapped them up and tucked them safely into my clothes. Momentarily hearing the grunt of a wild boar in the distance, I readied my gun, but it didn't come closer. Suddenly, a wild rabbit darted out. I threw my kindling knife, hitting its hind leg. Right after, a pregnant female rabbit ran past, and I quickly pounced on it, pinning it down safely without crushing the eggs in my coat. I bagged my rich harvest, 2 pheasants, 5 wild eggs, and 2 live wild rabbits. I planned to process the pheasants to sell at the county black market and donate the live rabbits to the production team, so the villagers could raise them for meat. Before leaving, I finished setting my pit trap with sharpened stakes and collected 2 heavy bundles of firewood to carry back home. However, as I approached our cave dwelling, I heard soft sobbing coming from inside. I rushed through the door and was instantly horrified to find Wei Wei holding Yi Yi in tears, with a red slap mark clearly visible on her face. Seeing my wife, Sun Wei Wei, with a red slap mark on her face, and our daughter Yi Yi in tears, rage consumed me. Yi cried out that grandmother and first aunt had come to steal our meat. Leaving a hatchet in hand, I instructed Wei Wei to look after the live rabbit in the sack and marched straight to the Chen family household. Meanwhile, Wei Wei brought Yi to seek help from village chief Chen Zhaide. When I arrived at the family home, I kicked open the gate and called them out. The cowardly family locked themselves in the main house, greedily gorging on our stolen meat. Indifferent to their retreat, I chopped down their window frame with my hatchet and broke into First Branch's room, smashing their furniture to pieces. Panicked, Li Qinfen ran out, screaming at me for ruining her room. Grandmother Zhang Guixiang tried her usual routine, shouting that I was unfilial. I ignored their nonsense and demanded to know who hit my wife and where our stolen meat was. When Li Qinfen brazenly denied everything, I brought my hatchet down onto her expensive wardrobe, splintering the wood. My father, Chen Donggen, tried to order me out, but I demanded the return of our stolen goods and a full apology to my wife. Right then, village chief Chen Zhaide arrived with Wei Wei, Yi Yi, and a crowd of curious villagers. The visible slap mark on Wei Wei's face made their guilt undeniable, and the gathering crowd openly criticized the Chen family for bullying us. Standing beside the village chief, I asked him to preside over justice. Village Chief Chen Zhaide sternly reprimanded my father and grandmother for stealing and resorting to violence after an official family division. He then asked me how I wanted to resolve the matter. Pointing to the red mark on my wife's face, I demanded a formal apology to Wei Wei. Furthermore, I stated that I found the stolen meat disgusting now, so they needed to compensate us with 2 yuan instead. Hearing the monetary demand, Li Qinfen shrieked in outrage, accusing me of highway robbery. Standing before my family, I held out my wood-chopping knife and demanded 2 yuan for our stolen meat, as well as a formal apology to my wife, Sun Weiwei. The surrounding villagers agreed that my request was completely fair after how brutally my family had treated us. Fearing that the scandal would ruin the marriage prospects of her son, and my third brother, my eldest sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, urged my grandmother to pay up. My grandmother grudgingly handed over 2 yuan, but I refused to leave without an apology. Little Yi Yi pointed at Li Qinfen, confirming she was the one who had hit Weiwei. Under my unwavering stare and the threat of smashing more furniture, Li Qinfen finally yelled out an apology. I took the money, warned my eldest brother Chen Shan never to trouble us again, and walked home with my wife and daughter. Back at the cave, I checked on the 2 wild rabbits I had caught and was relieved to find them alive. Weiwei confessed that she had hidden our frozen pork before they arrived, and Li Qinfen had slapped her for refusing to disclose its location. Touched by her bravery, I told her to fight back next time and handed her the wild eggs I found to cook for dinner. I then carried the live rabbits to village chief Chen Zhai's house. I proposed donating the pair, including the pregnant female, to the production team so the village could breed them for meat. When his wife worried that rabbit meat tasted too fishy, I assured them that Weiwei knew how to cook it properly. When Chen Zhide suggested putting Weiwei in charge of the rabbits, I politely declined to avoid sparking jealousy among the villagers. Instead, I recommended Uncle Jiqiang, who could not perform heavy farm labor due to his bad legs. The village chief approved of the idea and brought me to the brigade office at the former landlord's house. There, we met the accountant, Xu Guoqiang, who was excited at the prospect of eating meat. Chen Zhide corrected him, making it clear that these rabbits were meant for breeding, so the entire village could benefit in the long run. At the village committee, the village chief made it clear to our accountant that breeding the wild rabbits was my idea. I separated the 2 rabbits into different pig pens so the male wouldn't harm any future offspring. After returning to our cave home, I handed the 2 yuan compensation from my grandmother to my wife, Sun Weiwei, to hide in our wooden box. When I mentioned telling the village chief that she knew how to cook rabbit meat, Weiwei panicked because she didn't actually know how. I reassured her with a smile that I would teach her. Later, I brought a bowl of stewed spare ribs to Uncle Jiqiang and Aunt Chunhua to thank them. Although I left quickly without going inside, Aunt Chunhua was touched by my filial gesture and praised me to her husband. Back home, I comforted our daughter Yi Yi, who was still frightened by my family's earlier raid. Once Yi fell asleep, I held Weiwei in my arms, sharing a warm and quiet moment together. I promised her that after going to the county to exchange money and tickets tomorrow, I would buy cotton to make us a larger quilt. At dawn, Weiwei heated 2 steamed buns for my journey. I walked 2 hours from Chen Family Village to the county town, heading straight for a northern alley known as the Black Market. Covering my face with a knitted neck warmer, I stood in a quiet corner with 2 large wild pheasants in my basket, waiting for buyers. Soon, a flustered middle-aged woman approached my spot, looking to buy nourishment for her daughter-in-law in postpartum confinement. When she softly asked what I was selling, I cautiously asked her what she was looking to buy. At the Black Market, a middle-aged woman approached me looking for nourishment for her postpartum daughter-in-law. I showed her the 2 fat pheasants in my basket. She happily bought both for 3 yuan each, paying me a total of 4 yuan and some commonly used tickets. Before leaving, she asked me to save another bird for her in a few days. With the money earned, I approached a shrewd cloth seller in the alley. I bought 2 feet of navy blue cotton cloth and 2 pounds of cotton for our quilt. Spending all 4 yuan made me realize how quickly money vanishes. Packing the supplies carefully into my basket, I left the Black Market to head home. To avoid attention, I took a detour around the back of the mountain near Chen Family Village. Unfortunately, I ran right into my third brother, Chen He. Spotting the cloth in my basket, he greedily demanded I give it to him for an upcoming blind date. He even reached out with his filthy, mud-caked hands and dirtied the fabric. I backed away immediately. In my past life, I might have surrendered to his demands, but now I stood my ground. When he complained that he would stay a bachelor forever without new clothes, I spat toward his hands, telling him his marriage was none of my business. Threatening to run to our grandmother, he refused to apologize. I demanded $1 in compensation for dirtying my new cloth, threatening to expose him to our eldest brother for stealing eggs if he didn't pay. Panicked, Chen Hai pulled 8 cents from his shoe and handed it over, promising the rest later while secretly cursing my wife, Sun Weiwei, for snitching on him. When I finally reached our cave dwelling, Weiwei was waiting outside in the cold. We went inside, and I showed her the navy blue cloth and cotton. Even though Chen Hai had stained a spot, I proudly told her I extorted compensation from him for it. Seeing how much she loved the fabric, I promised to buy more next time so she and Yi Yi could have new clothes. I handed her the remaining cash and tickets, which she carefully stored away in our wooden box. With time to spare before dark, I took my machete and hunting rifle to Front Mountain to gather firewood. Along the way, I spotted pheasant tracks near a dry bush and discovered a nest containing 3 wild eggs, which I carefully gathered. After chopping and bundling a heavy load of wood, despite the freezing cold, I carried it back home and stacked it safely in our makeshift woodshed. Inside the cave dwelling, the warm aroma of stewed meat greeted me. Sitting down to eat cornbread with my family, I asked my wife, Sun Weiwei, how much food we had left. She told me we only had half a pound of mixed flour, 2 potatoes, and a cabbage. Realizing how little supplies we possessed, I asked her to retrieve 2 jin of wild boar meat from our hidden stash so I could trade it for grain with Uncle Ji Qiang. As Weiwei went outside to get the meat, she saw my grandmother, Zhang Guisheng, and my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, charging toward our cave and quickly ran back inside. Alerted by my brother Chen Hai, they had come to demand my newly bought cloth so they could make clothes for Li Qinfen's son, Chen Guangtao. When they loudly demanded the fabric, I mocked them, asking if Guangtao's parents had passed away for me to assume his care. Li Qinfen cursed at me, but I turned the tables by exposing Chen Hai. I revealed that Chen Hai sent them to distract everyone because he had paid me 80 cents not to expose him for stealing the family's eggs. Realizing they had been duped and that Chen Hai was the real thief, my grandmother and Li Qinfen furiously left to settle the score with him instead. Once they were gone, I hid 2 jin of wild boar meat inside my coat and headed to Uncle Ji Qiang's house. I offered the meat to trade for grain, explaining that our family was running out of food, while Aunt Chunhua tearfully gathered supplies for us in the kitchen. I reassured Uncle Ji Qiang about his new job raising the village rabbits, giving him helpful advice on feeding them hay during winter. Aunt Chunhua returned from the kitchen and handed me a pound of potatoes, a pound of radishes, and 3 pounds of mixed flour, insisting that our young daughter Yi Yi needed proper nourishment to grow. At Uncle Ji Qiang's house, I gratefully accepted the generous trade of grain. On my way back, I ran into the village gossip, Wang Ershan, nicknamed Big Mouth. When she pried about the heavy burlap sack I was carrying, I turned the tables by asking to borrow grain from her. Embarrassed, she claimed her family had no food to spare and quickly ran off. Returning to our cave, I found my wife, Sun Weiwei, sitting on the warm, heated brick bed, sewing our newly washed quilt. The peaceful scene warmed my heart. Finding an old, worn sweater in our wooden box, I asked Weiwei if she could unravel it and knit me a pair of gloves for my hunting trips in the mountains. She agreed, promising to unravel and respin the yarn tomorrow. As night fell around 4 o'clock, Weiwei set up the stove while I told our daughter Yi Yi the story of Journey to the West. Suddenly, loud shouting echoed outside. Village Chief Chen Jid knocked urgently on our door, instructing me to grab my hunting rifle and follow him immediately. Before leaving, I reminded Weiwei to lock the door behind me. The village chief explained that a wild boar had charged down from the mountain into the Sun family compound, scaring their daughter-in-law into a miscarriage. The local men were too terrified to stop the beast, allowing it to break through their encirclement. The wild boar went berserk and charged toward my family's house. Hearing the commotion, my grandmother, Zhang Guisheng, stepped into the courtyard, only to find the wild boar rushing directly at her. My eldest brother, Chen Shan, tried to step forward, but his wife, Li Qinfen, pulled him back to protect himself. Cowardly, the rest of the family hid inside the main house, leaving my grandmother alone in the yard. Terrified, she collapsed to the ground and fainted. When the boar saw her faint, it turned and began smashing against the front door of the main house. Watching the chaos unfold, I remembered how, in my previous life, I foolishly would have risked my life to save them without getting a single word of thanks. Standing back now, I scoffed inwardly at my past self, wishing I hadn't rushed over so quickly to help them out. Armed with my hunting rifle, I rushed into the courtyard as the aggressive wild boar turned around. Aiming by the moonlight, I fired a single shot directly into its temple, dropping the beast dead instantly. As the villagers gathered around, my eldest sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, immediately came out of hiding and pointed an accusing finger at me. She threw a fit on the ground, falsely accusing me of standing by while my fainted grandmother was run over by the boar, and demanded monetary compensation. My eldest brother, Chen Shan, chimed in, calling me unfilial. Then my father, Chen Donggen, pulled me aside with a fire poker, quietly threatening to discipline me unless I convinced the village chief to let our family keep all the meat for ourselves. Refusing to be manipulated, I shouted at the top of my lungs to expose my father's plan to hog the boar. Enraged, he swung the fire poker at my head, but I dodged it easily. Aunt Chunhua and several other witnesses stepped forward, calling out my family's lies and pointing out that Li Qinfen had actually stopped Chen Shan from saving my grandmother, while I had arrived after she fainted. When village chief Chen Zhide announced that the wild boar belonged to the entire village, I suggested having Uncle Zhao, our village barefoot doctor, inspect the carcass first. I warned that if the boar had encephalitis, eating its meat could be fatal. Greedy villagers and my family immediately protested, accusing me of lying to stop them from eating meat. The village chief shut them down fiercely, defending my intentions and reminding them of the dangers. Soon a young man arrived carrying Uncle Zhao on his back. As the crowd clamored with impatience, the village chief quieted everyone down, waiting for Uncle Zhao to inspect the wild boar and deliver his verdict. Barefoot Dr. Zhao Wai-ren carefully examined the wild boar and concluded it did not have encephalitis, as an infected pig would have died much faster. Old Lady Sun immediately began wailing, claiming the boar scared her daughter-in-law into a miscarriage and demanding a larger share of the meat as compensation. I called out her lie on the spot, pointing out the bruised mark on the boar's hind leg. I analyzed the situation for everyone. The starving wild boar had merely wandered down the mountain for food, but the Sun family tried to capture it for themselves. Their clumsy attempt panicked the boar, causing it to go berserk and ram into their wall out of fear. To prove my theory, I quietly tricked Old Lady Sun, promising her extra meat and pig trotters if she confessed the truth. Driven by greed, she foolishly admitted that her family had tried to corner the beast first. Her sudden confession instantly enraged the villagers, who loudly condemned her selfish greed and demanded she be denied any meat. Realizing she had been played, Old Lady Sun lunged at me in a rage. I easily dodged her attack, mocking her for believing that I, a non-official, had the authority to promise her pig trotters. Exhausted and terrified that village chief Chen Zhide might parade her through the streets for misbehaving, she slunk back to her house in shame. Meanwhile, my father, Chen Donggen, vented his frustration on Li Qinfen, blaming her for costing our family our share of the pork. The village chief had 2 strong men carry the 236-pound wild boar to the village committee, announcing that every household except the Sun and Chen families would receive a share, with roughly 160 pounds of meat to divide among 110 households. Each family received over a pound of pork. As I collected my share and prepared to head home to my wife and daughter, village chief Chen Zhide called out and asked me to wait behind because he had something important to discuss. While waiting with the wild boar meat, village chief Chen Zhide approached me, asking if I could catch a few more live rabbits for the village to breed. To improve my chances, I asked to borrow the village shovel to dig deeper traps. The village chief retrieved a slightly rusty shovel from the warehouse for me, warning me to take good care of it. I returned home, knocked on the door, and handed the wild boar meat to my wife, Sun Weiwei, who had been waiting cautiously with a machete. After warming myself by the stove, I climbed onto the heated brick bed and got some sleep. Early the next morning, I reheated the bed, while Weiwei made breakfast. Before leaving for the mountain, I carried multiple buckets of water from the frozen reservoir to fill our home jar so my family could take a proper bath later. After eating breakfast, I took my tools and headed up the mountain. Checking my initial small trap, I found a dead wild rabbit impaled on a wooden stake. Using the borrowed shovel, I spent 2 hours expanding the pit to 2 meters wide and deeper, lining the bottom with fresh stakes. I chopped off the rabbit's head as bait, placed thin sticks over the top, and covered it with dry grass to complete the trap. Continuing deeper toward the back mountain as the wind picked up, I suddenly spotted a gray-brown wolf chasing a pheasant. The wolf killed the bird, and then turned toward me with low growls. Raising my hunting rifle, I shot it directly in the left eye. As the injured wolf rolled in pain, I rushed forward and struck its head with my shovel, finishing it off. I skinned the wolf to make a warm vest, buried the carcass in the snow to avoid attracting other predators, and bagged the pheasant the wolf had killed. Walking a bit further, I spotted a curious, motionless roe deer staring at me. Delighted by the prospect of delicious barbecued meat, I struck the roe deer with my shovel, killing it instantly. Tying up the large roe deer with rope, I began dragging my heavy haul back down the mountain. I hauled the heavy roe deer into our cave dwelling, dropping it to the floor and startling my daughter, Yi. After teasing my wife, Sun Wei, I took Yi into my arms and kept the bloody game bag hidden from her sight. I skinned the roe deer and kept 2 hind legs for ourselves, planning to sell the remaining meat at the county black market tomorrow. To treat my family, I decided to prepare a barbecue with the roe deer meat. Leaving Wei to cut the meat into chunks, I grabbed my machete and went toward the reservoir to cut willow branches for skewers. On my way, I ran into village chief Chen Jide. He informed me that the commune had assigned our village a winter fishing quota for Chahu Lake. We needed to contribute 100 caddies of fish, and we could keep any excess for ourselves. I agreed to help lead the effort alongside Dogwa and Tiger. I asked the village chief if our torn fishing net had been repaired, and he awkwardly promised to have it fixed right away, so everyone could enjoy fish for the new year. Continuing to the reservoir, I spotted a woman standing near an ice hole. It was Liu Xiang, the Sun family's daughter-in-law, who was devastated after losing her baby. Overcome with despair, she suddenly jumped into the freezing ice hole. Acting quickly, I rushed forward and pulled her back just in time. I shoved her back to snap her out of it, bluntly telling her that suicide was foolish and that she should live to make her detractors regret their actions. Shocked by my words, she stopped crying and stared at me in silence. Leaving her to process her thoughts, I cut a bundle of willow branches and headed home. When I returned, I explained the brief delay to Wei, who praised me for saving Liu Xiang's life. I playfully teased Wei about a reward tonight, making her blush and run out of the kitchen. After she calmed down, she returned, and we happily worked together, skewering the meat on washed willow twigs, preparing a delicious meal for our family. Using lard and willow branches, I grilled skewers over the stove pit. The delicious aroma brought our daughter Yi running to the kitchen. My wife, Sun Wei, and Yi enjoyed the crispy, tender skewers immensely. After eating, I boiled water so Yi could take a fun bath in our wooden bucket. Once Wei coaxed Yi to sleep, she walked into the living room and caught me wiping off water droplets after my bath. Blushing, she tried to turn away, but I pulled her in and asked her to help wipe my back. I held her close, teasingly offering to help wipe her down too. We shared an intimate, quiet night together, careful not to wake our sleeping daughter. Before falling asleep, Wei mentioned she was almost done crocheting a woolen glove, and I promised we would make warm vests out of the wolf and roe deer pelts. Before dawn the next morning, I packed a basket with 30 caddies of roe deer meat, 30 caddies of wild boar meat, and a pheasant in a snakeskin bag. I also kept a headless rabbit, planning to teach Wei how to cook spicy rabbit later. Walking through falling snow, I reached the county black market just as daylight broke. I set up my spot in a corner, displaying samples of my meat. An old man approached first, buying 5 caddies of wild boar meat and 2 caddies of roe deer meat for 380 yuan, plus several coupons. Next, a neatly dressed woman bought 5 caddies of wild boar meat to earn a discounted caddy of roe deer meat. Soon after, The middle-aged woman from my previous visit returned. I handed over the reserved pheasant for the same price as last time, and offered her the remaining 3 caddies of wild boar meat and 2 caddies of roe deer meat for just 2 yuan. Thrilled with the deal, for the upcoming Lunar New Year, she bought everything and promised to recommend my meat to her neighbors. After she left, I stepped into a quiet alley to count my earnings. I had made 32 yuan along with various useful daily necessity and cloth coupons. Satisfied with the day's profits, I decided to shop around for some vegetables before heading home. At the black market, I bought 10 caddies of potatoes, 2 caddies of radishes, a winter melon, and a cabbage for 1 yuan and 85 cents. Craving leafy greens, I thought about getting a letter of introduction in the future, so I could visit the city and search for plastic sheeting to build a greenhouse. Before leaving the market, I stopped by a rice stall and spent 1 yuan and 40 cents on 10 pounds of new rice without needing ration coupons. With a full basket, I headed to the County Supply and Marketing Cooperative to buy fabric for my wife, son Weiwei, and our daughter, Yi. Looking through the selections at the counter, I spotted a nice pink floral print fabric. Just as I reached into my pocket for my cloth coupons, my eldest brother, Chen Shan, and my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, suddenly appeared. Li Qinfen immediately tried to take advantage of the situation. She stepped up to the clerk and ordered military green and floral fabrics, arrogantly claiming that I was with them and would cover the 6 yuan and 2 fabric coupons. I sneered and asked who was actually with them, pointing out that I was there to buy fabric for my wife and daughter, not for her. When the sales clerk demanded payment, Li Qinfen insisted I give her the money. I publicly mocked her, asking if she was trying to act like my daughter or my wife, adding that she was too ugly for either. The surrounding crowd began criticizing them for acting wealthy while expecting others to pay. Panicked when the clerk threatened to send her to jail for refusing to pay for cut cloth, Li Qinfen had no choice but to dig into her own hidden stash. She pulled out the 10 yuan our grandmother had given her for New Year's goods, meant for grandmother's 66th birthday celebration, along with 2 extra yuan of her own money to settle the bill. Once they paid, I proudly handed over my own cash and cloth coupons to buy the navy blue and floral fabrics for my family. The clerk mocked Li Qinfen while cutting my fabric, praising me for actually having the money and coupons. As Li Qinfen and Chen Shan walked out the door in total shame, she stomped her feet and furiously yelled at my brother for not asking grandmother for more money. After being publicly humiliated, my eldest brother, Chen Shan, lost his temper and slapped his wife, Li Qinfen, across the face. Stunned, Li Qinfen grabbed her newly bought cloth and ran off to her parents' house to escape my grandmother's inevitable scolding. Watching their drama unfold, I thought to myself that they got exactly what they deserved. I picked up soy sauce, vinegar, and 2 yuan worth of fruit candy for Yi at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative. Counting my remaining money, I had 20 yuan left from my original 32. I carefully tucked the cash and coupons away and started the long 2-hour walk back to Chen Family Village, resolving to buy a bicycle once I saved enough money. When I arrived home around lunchtime, my wife, Sun Weiwei, was crocheting warm woolen socks for my upcoming winter fishing trip. I handed her the 20 yuan, the rice, and the navy blue cloth. Weiwei was thrilled with our growing savings and promised to process a wolf pelt to sew me a warm vest. Meanwhile, little Yi was overjoyed to discover the fruit candy. After a cozy dinner of steamed egg custard, sweet potato porridge, and stewed potatoes, Yi fell asleep. I was just about to spend some affectionate time holding my wife when a loud knock sounded at the door. It was my childhood friend, Hu Zi, Tiger. He explained that village chief Chen Zhaid had called an urgent late-night mobilization meeting at the village committee to prepare for tomorrow's winter fishing. As we walked together, Hu Zi gleefully shared the gossip about my brother's family, losing over 10 yuan on fabric and running out of New Year funds. I casually explained that they tried to scheme against me, but ended up shooting themselves in the foot, which left Hu Zi in absolute awe. At the brightly lit village committee, the village chief announced the rules for the winter fishing event at Chahu Lake. Every brigade had to hand over a 100 jin quota, but any excess fish caught would belong directly to the brigade to distribute among our families. Upon hearing that we could bring home extra fish for the new year, everyone at the meeting grew wildly excited. At the mobilization meeting, my eldest brother, Chen Shan, panicked about being grouped with me, fearing he would be stuck doing extra work. He shouted to village chief Chen Jit, asking to be separated from me. The village chief shut him down, stating that my first group consisted of fish-catching experts and that Chen Shan would only be a burden. He officially assigned me, Huz, Dogwa, and another villager to the first group, leaving Chen Shan furious at the public humiliation. The village chief then instructed everyone to assemble at the village entrance at 4 o'clock the next morning for the trip to Chahu Lake. I went home to sleep peacefully next to my wife, Sun Weiwei, and our daughter. Around 3 o'clock the next morning, Huz knocked on our door. After finishing breakfast, I put on a warm wolf fur vest sewn by Weiwei, which Huzi greatly admired. Carrying our tools and fishing nets, the villagers made the 40-minute trek through the dark to Chahu Lake, where the ice was 1.5 meters thick. At the frozen lake, Chen Shan and my third brother, Chen Hai, approached me arrogantly, boasting that their second group would outdo us. Ignoring their foolishness, I led my team to a secluded spot, drew a square outline on the ice, and we began hammering a hole. Fueled by enthusiasm, my group broke through the ice in under half an hour. Meanwhile, the second group fell into complete chaos. Chen Shan's incompetence and lack of direction quickly angered his group members. When he threw his tools and yelled at them, the 5 other men cursed him out, pointing out that he wasn't their leader, and abandoned the 2 brothers to work on their own spot. Dogwa noticed Chen Shan and Chen Hai standing idly by and shouted that he would report them to the village chief so they wouldn't get any work points. Terrified of going home empty-handed, Chen Hai suggested asking me to let them join the first group. Believing that I was still soft-hearted, the 2 brothers decided to butter me up with sweet words, confident that I would take them in and carry their workload just like in the past. My eldest brother Chen Shan and third brother Chen Hai approached our spot on the ice. Huzi warned me that they didn't come with good intentions, but I kept smoothing out our fishing net, telling them to speak quickly if they had anything to say. Chen Hai put on a fake smile and asked to join our first group, claiming our brothers' teamwork would be better. When I pointed out Chen Shan's bad attitude, Chen Hai frantically whispered to Chen Shan to swallow his pride so they could deal with me later. Gritting his teeth, Chen Shan reluctantly begged to join. I instantly refused, reminding them that I had no authority to change the village chief's group assignments. Dogwa and Huz burst out laughing at Chen Shan's foolishness, and Dogwa promised he would still report the brothers to the village chief for slacking off. Realizing I had played him for a fool, an enraged Chen Shan swung a punch at me. I reacted quickly, grabbing Chen Hai and using him as a shield, so Chen Shan's heavy slap landed square on Chen Hai's face instead. Dazed by the blow, Chen Hai lost his balance and fell right into the large icy water hole. Dogwa deliberately took his time pulling Chen Hai out, letting him swallow a bunch of freezing water before dragging him onto the bank. Soaked and shivering uncontrollably, Chen Hai was taken home by Chen Shan, while Dogwa cursed them for scaring away the fish. Once they left, my group got back to business. With the ice holes dug, we guided our fishing net through the inlet and small holes to the outlet. While waiting for the fish to swim in, Dogwa asked why I had separated from my family. Huzi told him to stop gossiping, but I stepped in to keep the peace, explaining that living on my own was simply better given how the Chen family treated me. After enough time passed, I shouted for everyone to haul in the net. The 5 of us pulled with all our strength, dragging the heavy net out of the outlet. As the net emerged, packed to the brim with large thrashing fish, my teammates cheered in excitement, drawing envious looks from the other teams across Chahu Lake. My team successfully hauled our fishing net ashore, collecting a huge catch. When the commune counter weighed our buckets, we had caught 280 jin of fish. After leaving the required 100 jin quota, we kept 180 jin for our village. Meanwhile, the second group pulled up a meager net and openly blamed my brother Chen Shan's bad leadership, envying my team's success. We paired up and carried our buckets back to the village, where village chief Chen Jide, was overjoyed by our results and promised Dog Hua a larger net for next year. Suddenly, a villager rushed over to report that my wife, Sun Weiwei, was locked in a fierce fight with my grandmother, Zhang Guixiang. I dropped everything and sprinted straight home. When I arrived, I found Weiwei holding a machete at our doorway, bravely protecting our daughter, Yi, while my grandmother stood cursing at her. My nephew, Chen Guangtao, claimed that Weiwei had beaten him up. Weiwei broke down in tears, explaining the truth. Guangtao had brought a gang of local kids to pin little Yi to the ground and beat her, so she stepped in to save our daughter. Furious that Guangtao dared to harm my daughter while I was away, I instructed Weiwei to take crying Yi safely inside the cave. My grandmother shouted at me, demanding an explanation for Guangtao's scuffle and accusing me of trying to drown my brother Chen Hai in the frozen lake earlier. With a cold face, I grabbed Guangtao and delivered 2 hard kicks to his buttocks. One for his lying and one as revenge for hurting my daughter. As Guangtao shrieked in pain, my heart-stricken grandmother charged at me with her cane, screaming that she would fight me to the death. Luckily, Huzi ran up just in time and grabbed her arm to restrain her. Village Chief Chen Jide then arrived, completely furious at the chaotic scene, and ordered a local witness named Gusheng to explain exactly what had taken place. The villager Gosheng explained to Village Chief Chen Jide that he had found my grandmother, Zhang Guishang, cursing at my wife, Sun Weiwei, while Weiwei protected our daughter, Yi, with a machete. When the village chief asked Weiwei to explain, she tearfully stated that my nephew Chen Guangtao and a group of boys had beat up Yi, and she had only pulled them apart without hitting anyone. To expose the truth, I grabbed a few fruit candies from inside our house and approached the young boys who had been with Guangtao. I promised them candy if they told the truth. Tempted by the treat, the boys, Zhuang and Xiaoming, confessed everything. They revealed that Guangtao had kicked down Yi's snowman and bribed them with roasted sweet potatoes to help him beat up my 3-year-old daughter. Zhuang's mother got into a screaming match with my grandmother for calling her son a liar, while I handed out the promised candies to the boys. Weiwei then brought Yi forward, showing the visible scratch marks near our daughter's eye. Furious that a gang of older boys had ganged up on a toddler, Village Chief Chen Jide stepped in to enforce justice and protect the village's reputation. The village chief ordered that all families involved forfeit their shares of the winter fishing catch to Yi for her recovery. Additionally, each involved family had to pay 50 cents in medical expenses, while the Chen family was ordered to pay a full $1. My grandmother threw a tantrum on the ground, refusing to pay a single cent for a girl. When the village chief threatened to parade her through the streets, she quickly shut her mouth, but then tried to turn the tables. She demanded that I pay her 10 yuan instead, falsely claiming that I had pushed my 3rd brother, Chen Hai, into the frozen lake and almost killed him. Shocked by her accusation, the surrounding crowd began whispering in disbelief, wondering if I had truly tried to drown my own brother. When my grandmother, Zhang Guixiang, accused me of pushing my 3rd brother, Chen Hai, into the frozen lake, I calmly pointed out that she had no evidence. My teammate Hu Zi and Dog Hua immediately spoke up, explaining that my eldest brother, Chen Shan, had tried to punch me, but accidentally struck Chen Hai, causing him to lose his footing and tumble into the lake. When my grandmother stubbornly claimed the second group would back her up, village chief Chen Jide called them forward. Instead of supporting her, the members of the second group angrily complained about Chen Shan and Chen Hai. They confirmed that the 2 brothers did no work, picked fights, and caused Chen Hai's own fall. Exposed and thoroughly humiliated, my grandmother tried to sneak off with her grandson, Chen Guangtao. Village Chief Chen Jide stopped them instantly, forcing Guang to apologize to my daughter, Yi, and demanding the $1 compensation. When my grandmother dramatically claimed she had no money and offered her life instead, the village chief coldly threatened to deduct the amount from her family's work points next year. Panicked by the financial loss, she reluctantly pulled out crumpled bills to pay up. The parents of the other bullies followed suit, apologizing and paying their shares as well. The village chief handed the collected money to me as a token gesture. Afterward, he led the crowd to the village committee to distribute the winter fishing catch. Back home, my heart ached seeing the scratch near Yi's eye. I told my wife, Sun Weiwei, to take Yi to barefoot Dr. Zhao for medicine, and I handed Yi a piece of fruit candy. Sweet little Yi insisted on saving the candy to comfort her mother, which moved Weiwei to tears. Joining the villagers at the village committee, Village Chief Chen Zhide publicly praised my leadership in securing such a massive catch. He awarded me the largest fish in the hall, prompting unanimous applause from the community. Just as everyone was happily receiving their shares of fish, Uncle Chen Jiqiang came sprinting frantically from the pigsty, shouting for the village chief to come check on the animals immediately. When Uncle Chen Jiqiang rushed over frantically, Village Chief Chen Zhide feared the worst for the wild rabbits. But Uncle Jiqiang excitedly announced that the mother rabbit had given birth to a new litter. The village chief cheered, but I quickly cautioned him not to approach the pen just yet. Wild rabbits are easily frightened by human scent, which can cause them to kill their young. Seeing the villagers' confusion, the village chief publicly revealed that I had donated the breeding pair to help start a village rabbit farm. He explained that selling the rabbits would help us buy new piglets, and assured everyone that my wife, Sun Weiwei, knew how to prepare delicious rabbit meat without any off flavors. The crowd praised my family while criticizing my father's household for neglecting me. Noticing my friend Huzi joking about wanting a wife, I remembered how loyal he was in my previous life. Realizing I needed a trustworthy partner, as my business expands beyond the black market, I invited him to our cave dwelling for dinner. When I got home, my wife assured me that barefoot Dr. Zhao said our daughter Yi's scratch was light and would heal fine. When I mentioned inviting Huzi over, Weiwei warmly supported my decision, proving again what a wonderful partner she is. Around 4 p.m., Huzi arrived, bringing his own grain so as not to burden us. I turned down his grain, and we sat down to a feast of steamed chicken cake, stewed fish, and sweet potato porridge. Shocked by the lavish spread, Huzi wondered if we were spending everything at once. Yi innocently chimed in that we ate like this every day. Looking at Huzi, I got straight to the point. I asked if he wanted to team up with me to hunt in the mountains and trade for good food and money every day, warning him that the work would be tough and risky. Eager for a better life, Huzi agreed without hesitation, promising he could handle any hardship. I told him to meet me at my door at 6 o'clock the next morning to head up the mountain together. My friend Huzi, Tiger, agreed to join my hunting venture, promising to keep our plans secret so his grandmother wouldn't worry. Before leaving our cave dwelling after dinner, he insisted on leaving his brought rations to repay my kindness. The next morning, Huzi arrived bright and early. My wife, Sun Weiwei, had packed us warm pork and cabbage pies and potato pancakes for the trip. Armed with wooden spears, my hunting rifle, and Huzi's freshly sharpened wood-chopping knife, we set off straight for the deeper back mountain, where larger game roams. Along the way, we checked my previous trap. Though the pit was small, we found a frozen rabbit and a pheasant inside. I bagged the game and reset the trap, making a mental note to dig larger pits with steel clamps once the frozen soil thaws. Continuing further into the deep, snow-covered forest where few people ever tread, Huzi spotted a cave next to a large rock. We carefully tested the ground with our spears and explored inside. The cave was naturally formed, featuring a narrow, wind-blocking entrance that opened up into a spacious interior. Pleased with the discovery, I realized we could build a wooden bed inside to use it as a resting base for future deep mountain hunts. We sat down on a rock inside the cave to eat our pies and shared some sorghum liquor Huzi brought. The alcohol warmed us right up against the freezing cold. After finishing our meal, we picked up our tools, planning to step outside and chop down a few trees to fix up the cave's entrance. Suddenly, Huzi pointed out a white figure in the distance. Looking up, I froze in shock. A large, silver-white bear was standing upright, staring right at us and waving its paw. It was a dangerous, massive man-bear. Raising my hunting rifle and aiming straight at its head, I warned Huzi to be on high alert, knowing that a single shot might not be enough to stop the beast if it decided to charge. The massive, 3-meter-tall man-bear growled impatiently and charged toward us. I raised my hunting rifle and fired, but the fast beast shifted, and the bullet only hit its forelimb. Enraged, the bear bared its teeth and pounced toward Huzi. My friend dodged by rolling on the snow, slashing the bear's shoulder with his machete. I seized the opening to shoot the back of the bear's neck, but the hit was not fatal. The frantic bear lunged straight at me. Huzi rushed to help, ignoring his hands that were cut by sharp stones hidden under the snow. As I backed away, I tripped over a rock and fell backward. The bear pounced, slamming its massive paw against the stone next to me, cracking it. Reacting instantly, I swung my machete directly into the bear's neck. Blood spurts sprayed over my face and body as the heavy bear collapsed dead right beside me. Huzi plunged his knife into the bear's stomach, then slumped to the ground, gasping for air. When I asked if he found it too dangerous to continue hunting with me, he firmly refused to back down, declaring that he wanted to work hard to save money, get married, and ease his grandmother's mind. Seeing his resolve, I bandaged his bleeding hand using leftover cloth strips from my vest. Together, we processed the bear, keeping its valuable skin, paws, and gallbladder, while burying the rest in the snow. We gathered a bundle of firewood and headed down the mountain, agreeing to meet around 4 a.m. the next day to take the bear parts to the county. When I got home before sunset, my wife, Sun Wei, panicked at the sight of blood all over my clothes. I quickly reassured her that it belonged to the bear, though I spared her the terrifying details of our near-death encounter. Wei mentioned she wanted to knit warm sweaters for Yi and me, so I asked her for 2 yuan and our remaining tickets to buy yarn in the county. Later that evening, I boiled water for a bath and told Wei that I would ask Carpenter Zhang to build us a large wooden tub soon. Wei blushed and fled to the bedroom, but I followed her in, and we shared a long, affectionate night together. I woke up feeling full of energy, cooked breakfast, and kept it warm for my wife, Sun Wei, and our daughter Yi. Soon, Huzi Tiger arrived, and we set off together for the county town. Along the way, I advised him to stay alert, observe carefully, and split up to run if anything went wrong at the black market. Once we arrived, we set up our spot in a quiet corner. Before long, a man in black approached, desperately seeking high-end ingredients for a cooking competition. Seeing his eagerness, I offered him the entire bear haul, including the bear paws, skin, and gallbladder, and held up 2 fingers. When he hesitated, I reminded him that these rare items were risked with human lives and hard to come by. The man hurriedly ran off to fetch his money, pleading with me to hold the items for him. Huzi was stunned, assuming I was asking for 2 or 20 yuan. When I quietly told him the price was 200 yuan, he nearly gasped in shock. Soon, the buyer returned, handed over a bag of cash, and happily packed away the bear parts, along with a free snakeskin bag of pheasants and rabbits I threw in. We stepped into a deserted alley to split the earnings. I tried to give Huzi 80 yuan, a 60-40 split, but he stubbornly refused, insisting that my hunting skill made the deal possible and that a 20-80 split was fair. I agreed to take back 40 yuan for now, leaving him with 40 yuan, an enormous sum that left him feeling like he was dreaming. With cash in hand, I bought a tub of sweet-smelling Shanghai face cream for 8 cents to treat Wei. Passing a high-gluten flour stall, I bought 5 jin of white wheat flour, and Huzi bought 2 jin for his grandmother. Next, we visited the state-owned supply and marketing cooperative, where I spent a bit extra to get yarn without coupons, picking out pastel pink, army green, and pale yellow so Wei could knit sweaters for our family. As lunchtime approached, I looked at Huzi's bandaged hand and invited him to the state-owned restaurant for a rich meal to help him recover. Huzi Tiger tried to offer to pay for our meal, but I promised to let him treat me next time we made a big sale. We crossed the street from the supply and marketing cooperative to Wuxiang state-owned restaurant. As I ordered braised pork, stir-fried potatoes, rice, and steamed buns, a waitress named Zhou Lili recognized me. She was the woman I had saved from a wild boar on the mountain. Excited to see me again, Zhou Lili insisted on paying for our meal to repay my life-saving favor. She went to the kitchen and brought out an incredible spread: 4 dishes, a soup, white rice, and steaming white steamed buns. Huzi was completely awestruck by the feast. As we ate, I loved the braised pork so much that I wanted my wife and daughter to try it too. since takeout bags didn't exist. I paid 2 cents and a meal ticket at the counter, then crossed the street to the supply and marketing cooperative to buy a metal lunchbox. Jolie Lee tried to pay for the takeout as well, but I firmly insisted on paying for it myself so as not to take advantage of her kindness. When I returned to the table, Hoodzi was waiting for me before finishing his food. We devoured everything on the table down to the last drop of radish soup. Jolie Lee brought over my packed lunchbox with a warm smile, and after thanking her for her hospitality, Hoodzi and I gathered our belongings and left. After we walked out, the other restaurant staff crowded around Jolie Lee to tease her about me. Blushing, she explained that I was simply her savior from the mountain trip. Just then, a young man named Zhang Hao stormed into the restaurant. Having heard rumors from a friend that Jolie Lee was flirting with another man, he rushed over in a jealous rage to confront her and find out who had caught her attention. At the restaurant, Jolie Lee turned down Zhang Hao's bold romantic advances. She disliked his arrogance and resented how her family pressured her to marry him for his wealthy background. When Zhang Hao tried to cause a scene, she threatened to cut off all communication, forcing him to leave in anger. Meanwhile, Hoodzi and I made our way back to Chen family village. At the entrance, my wife, Sun Weiwei, and our daughter, Yi Yi, were waiting in the cold to welcome us home. Nearby, my eldest sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, strutted past in new clothes she made after running off to her parents' house. I ignored her and carried Yi Yi home, while Weiwei followed without a word. Jealous of our new clothes and thriving life, Li Qinfen slunk back to the Chen family home. Faced with a mountain of housework and my grandmother's constant nagging, Li Qinfen hatched a scheme. She decided my bedridden third brother, Chen Hai, needed a wife to take over the chores. To fund a bride and bring good luck to cure Chen Hai's fever, she convinced my father, Chen Donggen, to demand a loan from me. My father greedily agreed, privately planning to pocket half the money for alcohol. Once inside our cave dwelling, I unpacked our groceries and handed my remaining earnings to Weiwei. She was completely stunned as she counted the stack of cash. I explained that the bare parts sold for 200 yuan, leaving us with 160 yuan, after giving Hoodzi his 40 yuan share. Overwhelmed, Weiwei immediately hid the money under the heated brick bed for safekeeping. Next, I opened the metal lunchbox to show her the delicious braised pork I brought back from the state-owned restaurant. Seeing that Weiwei wanted to save it to eat together for dinner, I smiled and asked her to hold out her hand. I placed the delicate tin of Shanghai face cream into her palm. Smelling its faint, sweet fragrance, Weiwei looked up at me in sheer surprise, deeply touched that I had bought it just for her. I proudly assured my wife, Sun Weiwei, that she deserved the best Shanghai face cream and promised to provide a good life for her and our daughter, Yi Yi. Touched by my words, Weiwei opened the tin and loved its fragrance. She agreed to use it, and we decided Yi Yi could use a little once her facial scratch healed. As Weiwei went to the kitchen to steam white flour buns, I stepped outside to gather firewood. Suddenly, my father, Chen Donggen, arrived with a fake gentle tone, asking to borrow money for my third brother's marriage. Knowing he just wanted to steal my earnings, I reminded him that he hadn't given me a single penny when we separated. Enraged, Chen Donggen threatened to report my black market trading. Unbothered, I laughed and told him to go ahead, knowing he was just bluffing. If he dared report the black market, the organizers and traders would brutally retaliate against him. Frustrated that his empty threat failed, my father angrily declared that I shouldn't call him father ever again. I sarcastically thanked him, and he turned around and stomped off. Instead of gathering firewood immediately, I walked over to my friend Hoodzi's house. Remembering from my past life that a massive snowstorm around the Lunar New Year would block the mountain and cause severe firewood shortages, I asked Hoodzi to join me in collecting extra wood tomorrow. I also lied about hearing weather warnings in the county to convince him. Hoodzi agreed to come along and mentioned he wanted to buy refined grains for his grandmother during our next county trip. On my way back, I planned to spend my upcoming days off fixing our broken table and hiring carpenter Zhang to build a proper wooden bathtub. Meanwhile, my father returned home furious. When my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, eagerly asked how much money he got from me, he took off his shoe and threw it squarely at her face, cursing her for coming up with such a terrible idea and embarrassing him. At my sister-in-law Li Qinfen's urging, my father, Chen Donggen, agreed to go to the village committee to sue me for unfilial behavior, claiming I refused to support him in his old age. He promised to take half of any money they squeezed out of me for drinking. The next morning, a messenger arrived at my house to tell me that my father was suing me. I reassured my wife, Sun Weiwei, and headed straight to the village committee. When I entered, the entire Chen family, except for my bedridden third brother, Chen Hai, was waiting. A large crowd of villagers had also gathered to watch. Li Qinfen immediately put on a fake crying performance, shouting that I was an unfilial monster who let my own father starve. I shut her down instantly by asking if she was practicing wailing for my father's funeral, which made her freeze in embarrassment. Village Chief Chen Jide asked if her accusations were true. I pointed out to the entire crowd that when my family separated, they kicked me out with nothing, intending for my wife, child, and me to starve. Now that I was doing well, they wanted to leech off me again. Reminded of how heartlessly I had been treated, the villagers loudly turned on my father, calling his family ungrateful leeches, who favored their eldest son while treating me like dirt. Some even joked that I couldn't possibly be his biological son. Overwhelmed by shame and anger, my father yelled at the crowd and stormed off. Seeing him leave, Li Qinfen tried to demand 10 yuan directly from the village chief under the guise of elder support. The village chief scolded her fiercely for her blatant greed, forcing her to slink away in defeat. When my grandmother, Zhang Guishang, learned they failed, she gave Li Qinfen an ultimatum: return to her parents' home and retrieve the money she spent on cloth, or my eldest brother would divorce her. Terrified, Li Qinfen rushed off without even eating lunch. Meanwhile, the surrounding villagers quickly pieced together that my family was trying to force me to pay for my third brother's upcoming wedding. They praised my resilience, and I bowed deeply to thank them for standing up for me. Outside the building, my friend Hu Zi was waiting anxiously to check if I was okay. My friend Hu Zi and I went to Front Mountain and chopped down a tree so I could fix my broken table. We carried the log back to my cave dwelling, but just as we were about to head back for firewood, my wife Sun Weiwei ran out crying. Our daughter, Yi Yi, was sweating heavily and clutching her stomach in intense pain. Panicked, I immediately decided to take Yi to the county hospital. Sun Weiwei grabbed all our money, and I gave Hu Zi our house key so he could light a fire in our stove tonight to keep the place warm. Carrying Yi Yi, I sprinted the long distance, reaching the hospital in just an hour and a half instead of the usual 2. The doctor diagnosed Yi Yi with acute gastroenteritis and started her on an IV drip. While Yi Yi rested, I bought 2 lunch boxes and a water bottle at the supply and marketing cooperative, then picked up plain porridge and a meat dish with rice from Wuxiang state-owned restaurant. While I was there, the waiters whispered about me, and a friend of Zhang Hao's spotted me and rushed off to report my presence. Back at the hospital, Weiwei and I shared the meat and rice lunchbox before feeding Yi Yi her plain porridge. Seeing my daughter recover brought back painful memories of my past life, where my family refused to pay for Yi Yi's medical treatment, leading to her death and Weiwei's tragic suicide. Grateful that my rebirth allowed me to save them this time, I watched over Yi Yi until her 2-hour IV finished. Once Yi Yi felt much better, we decided to visit the festive, red-decorated supply and marketing cooperative to buy supplies for the upcoming new year. Since a heavy snowstorm was approaching, I bought plenty of grain, cotton, and cloth to make Yi Yi her own quilt, as well as expensive milk candies for her. Spending a total of 7 yuan and 80 cents, I wrapped our purchases in a large cloth bundle. As my family happily walked out of the store, a young man watched us intently from a distance. In the county town, a man named Shaden rushed over to inform Zhang Hao that he had spotted me at the supply and marketing cooperative buying supplies with my wife and daughter. Hearing that I was already married with a child, Zhang Hao was thrilled. Rewarding Shadan with an export watch receipt, he rushed to Zhou Lili's house to share the news, convinced it would make her lose interest in me. Zhang Hao dragged Zhou Lili downstairs and angrily confronted her, asking why she liked a country bumpkin. Zhou Lili defended me, insisting that I was her savior and that nothing improper existed between us. Zhang Hao then revealed that I was married with a wife and daughter. Zhou Lili was stunned for a moment, but quickly composed herself, telling Zhang Hao that she only saw him as an older brother and running back home in tears. Zhang Hao stood at the bottom of the stairs, angrily plotting a way to teach me a lesson. Meanwhile, my family and I returned to Chen family village around 4 p.m. Hu Zi had already chopped and neatly stacked a pile of firewood in our woodshed. To thank him for his hard work, I handed him a bowl of fresh white flour steamed buns that my wife, Sun Weiwei, had just made. Hu Zi gratefully accepted them and went home. After seeing Hu Zi off, I went to the kitchen to teach Weiwei how to make spicy rabbit. I wanted her to master the recipe so she could demonstrate her cooking skills when the village's newly bred rabbits matured. Guiding her step by step, I instructed her to heat lard in a pot, fry dried chili peppers and scallions, toss in the rabbit meat chunks until golden brown, and season it with salt. When the dish was ready, we both tasted it. The rabbit was spicy, tender, and incredibly flavorful. Weiwei's eyes lit up in amazement, praising me for knowing such a wonderful recipe. I smiled and explained that we could also make delicious grilled rabbit with homemade sauce, reminding her that washing the meat thoroughly beforehand was the key secret to both cooking methods. Because wild rabbit meat can have an earthy taste if not prepared properly, using chili peppers or homemade sauce masks the gamey smell effectively. Since spicy rabbit was too spicy for Yi Yi, who was still recovering, she drank plain porridge while I promised to make her braised rabbit once she got better. That evening, I fixed our table by replacing its 4 broken legs and resolved to build a separate room for Yi Yi when I save enough money to build a new house. After cleanup, Sun Weiwei and I shared an intimate, passionate night together. The next morning, Hu Zi arrived to inform me that Chen Family Village was holding its annual awards ceremony at the village committee. I ate a leftover white flour bun for breakfast and headed to the courtyard alone, leaving Sun Weiwei and Yi Yi warm at home. In previous years, I always let my brother, Chen Shan, take the model worker title, because my grandmother lied that the certificate was useless paper. Later, those certificates nearly helped Chen Shan land a job at the county glass factory. This time, I sat calmly by the bonfire, determined not to hand over my hard work to anyone. When Chen Shan and his wife, Li Qinfen, arrived, they arrogantly assumed the award was theirs again, boasting loudly as some villagers insincerely flattered them. However, Village Chief Chen Zide slammed his hand on the table to quiet the crowd and officially declared me, Chen Yuan, as this year's model worker. Not listening carefully, Li Qinfen immediately stood up, beaming with pride, and publicly thanked the village chief for confirming that her husband was the most outstanding man in the village. The entire audience burst into roaring laughter, mocking her by asking when her husband had suddenly become Chen Yuan. When Wang Ershen mocked Li Qinfen, she cursed at him, but he just laughed and told her she couldn't hear properly. The entire crowd burst into laughter, pointing out that village chief Chen Zide had named me, Chen Yuan, as the model worker. My brother Chen Shan's face turned black with humiliation. Li Qinfen shouted in disbelief, accusing the village chief of favoring me, but the village chief shot back, asking if she thought everyone was as biased as her family. The surrounding villagers loudly defended me, pointing out my tireless fieldwork, my role in providing wild boar meat and winter fish for the community, and my contribution in securing breeding rabbits. Village Chief Chen Zide stamped my official certificate, and I accepted it warmly, thanking the village committee and bowing to my supportive neighbors. Afterward, the village chief gave brief instructions for spring planting before dismissing the meeting. As most people left, Li Qinfen and Chen Shan confronted me, greedily demanding that I hand over the award. I sarcastically told her to talk to the village chief. When we walked up to him, Li Qinfen falsely claimed I had agreed to give the award to Chen Shan. I immediately exposed her lie, clarifying that I only agreed to walk over, not to give away my achievement. Furious, the village chief yelled at Li Qinfen for treating the official honor like a joke, threatening to give her extra labor if she kept bothering him. Panicked, she dragged Chen Shan away in defeat. With them gone, I officially asked village chief Chen Zide to allocate the land at the foot of the mountain to me so I could build a fenced courtyard in the spring. He readily agreed, granting me the largest plot as a reward. I also passed along a warning I heard in the county about an approaching heavy snowstorm so the village could prepare extra firewood. I reassured him that Yi Yi was fully recovered from her stomach illness. Over the next few days, Huzi and I chopped wood until the snow became too deep. I spent my time fixing our home furniture and picking up a custom wooden bathtub from Carpenter Zhang. Exactly as I predicted, a massive snowstorm blocked the mountain passes. Those who listened to the village chief's warning had plenty of firewood, while lazy families, including my father's household, quickly ran out of fuel and had to beg others to survive the freezing cold. As knee-deep snow continued to fall for days, the Chen family quickly ran out of firewood. Desperate for fuel, my sister-in-law Li Qinfen suggested that my eldest brother, Chen Shan, sneak over to my place to steal wood from my outdoor shed. Chen Shan dragged my third brother, Chen Hai, along for the night raid. I regularly cleared the snow around my cave dwelling, so I heard them sneaking around outside my shed. Stepping out into the dark, I pointed my hunting rifle straight at Chen Shan's back. Terrified, they dropped the firewood onto the ground, and Chen Shan collapsed in fear. Pretending they were just trying to borrow wood, they quickly put everything back when I ordered them to restore the pile. I warned them never to return, sending them running off in panic. As they fled through the dark, Chen Shan slipped on the cleanly swept path and broke his leg. Chen Hai dragged him home, where a panicked Li Qinfen and my grandmother, Zhang Guixiang, cursed my name. Realizing they could no longer bully me directly, Chen Shan convinced the family to quietly plot a major scheme to ruin my life in the future. With no other choice, they were forced to buy firewood from other villagers just to survive the freezing cold. By January 27, 1960, New Year's Eve, I had been reborn for nearly a month. That morning, my wife, Sun Weiwei, dressed our family in the new clothes and hand-knitted sweaters she had made. Our daughter, Yi Yi, looked adorable in her pink sweater, floral pants, and neatly braided hair. Together in the kitchen, Weiwei and I prepared a festive 6-course New Year's meal featuring braised pork ribs, roasted roe deer meat, stir-fried potatoes, winter melon soup, steamed egg custard, and wild boar meat dumplings. As we stayed up late into the night according to tradition, little Yi Yi dozed off peacefully in my arms. In stark contrast, my grandmother's 66th birthday and New Year's Eve dinner were a miserable affair. Because Li Qinfen had wasted their money on fabric, the family had no fresh meat or fish, leaving them with nothing but plain pork cracklings to eat while complaining about their miserable lives. My father, Chen Dongzhen, slammed his chopsticks on the table in frustration, ending our family's miserable New Year's Eve dinner on a bitter note. On the first day of the Lunar New Year, I talked with my wife, Sun Weiwei, about visiting her parents' home in Taohua Village the next day. In my past life, I had neglected her family due to my foolish filial piety, which led them to break off contact with me after Weiwei and Yi Yi died. This time, I was determined to bring her back in high spirits and give her proper respect. Touched by my decision, Weiwei choked up with gratitude. On the morning of the second day of the Lunar New Year, we headed into the county. At the Supply and Marketing Cooperative, I filled 2 glass bottles with bulk wine and bought peanuts for my father-in-law. I also purchased 2 gin of roasted fruit, a rare and delicious northern treat wrapped neatly in oil paper, to prove to her family that we were doing well. As we walked south toward Taohua Village, I noticed a group of thugs tailing us. I deliberately led them down a secluded side path to confront them. A gang of hooligans led by a man named Sang Biao demanded we hand over our goods. When they charged at us with wooden sticks, I shielded Weiwei and Yi Yi, smashed a wine bottle over the first attacker's head, and knocked out another with a heavy wooden stick. To keep my family safe, I yelled at Weiwei to run ahead to her brother's place while I held off the rest. Wielding a broken bottle and a stick, I single-handedly crushed the entire gang, pinning the leader to the ground under my boot. Pressured by the glass bottle held against his face, the terrified gang leader confessed that a man named Zhang Hao had hired them to attack me. After threatening the leader to stay away, I forced him to go back to the Supply and Marketing Cooperative and buy 2 fresh bottles of wine to replace the ones smashed during the fight. he quickly returned, handed over the wine, and fled with his beaten gang. Meanwhile, Wei Wei was frantically running toward Taohua village with Yi Yi in her arms, desperate to get help. As she sprinted down the icy road, her foot slipped, sending her, Yi Yi, and our supplies crashing onto the cold ground. My wife, Sun Wei Wei, ran frantically to her parents' home in Taohua village, arriving in just 40 minutes. Covered in snow and holding our crying daughter Yi Yi, she startled her family. Her brother, Sun Hong, grabbed an axe to rescue me from the thugs. Luckily, I ran into him on my way over, unharmed, and holding 2 replacement wine bottles I had forced the gang leader to buy. We returned to the house together, where Wei Wei was greatly relieved to see me safe. We presented our gifts to my father-in-law, Sun Daliang, liquor, peanuts, roasted fruit pastries, and fresh wild boar and roe deer meat I had hunted. My father-in-law was delighted, seeing that my wife and daughter were dressed in fine new clothes and doing well. However, Sun Hong's pregnant wife, Wang Chuishang, acted rudely and arrogantly. She immediately tried to grab the expensive roasted fruit pastries for herself, ignoring the fact that they were a formal gift for her parents-in-law. When Sun Hong tried to stop her, she selfishly complained about the cost of buying them herself. My father-in-law scolded Sun Hong for failing to manage his wife. When my father-in-law asked why we were able to visit this year, I explained that we had officially separated from my family and moved out on our own. Hearing this, Wang Qisheng loudly accused us of putting on a fake show of wealth and asked if we had come to borrow money, declaring they had none to spare. Furious at her disrespect toward my family, Sun Hong slapped Wang Qisheng across the face and ordered her back to her room. Despite her screaming about her pregnancy, Sun Hong carried her into the west room to stop the embarrassing scene. My father-in-law apologized for the humiliation, but I reassured him that we didn't take her words to heart. Wei Wei added that we wouldn't let her sister-in-law's bad attitude ruin our family bond. At my in-law's home, my father-in-law, Sun Daliang, was furious at his greedy daughter-in-law, Wang Chuisheng, for making a scene. Her husband, Sun Hong, warned her to behave or be sent back to her parents. She quieted down, and after lunch, my wife, Sun Wei Wei, and I decided to head home early to avoid further tension. We returned to Chen family village after dark. When Wei Wei went into the dark kitchen, she was terrified by a shadow. I grabbed a wood-chopping knife and a kerosene lamp to investigate, discovering my third brother, Chen Hai, hiding inside. He had climbed through our window earlier to steal food to impress a potential bride's family, expecting us to be away overnight. When we returned, he got trapped. Caught red-handed with a cold steamed bun in his pocket, he made up a pathetic excuse about coming to heat our bed. Refusing to listen to his lies, I sent Wei Wei to fetch village chief Chen Zide while I kept guard. The village chief arrived with a crowd of curious onlookers. Realizing he was in deep trouble, Chen Hai dropped to his knees, kowtowing and begging for mercy. When a few villagers urged me to forgive him because he was young family, I publicly shut them down, pointing out his repeated theft and maturity. After Wei Wei confirmed no valuables were missing yet, I made my stance crystal clear to the village chief. I demanded an official, legally binding severance of all ties with my father's family. If anyone from that household ever trespassed or harassed us again, I would send them straight to the police station. The village chief agreed and summoned my father, Chen Dongan. Humiliated and furious, my father had no choice. Either sign the agreement or watch Chen Hai get dragged off to the county police station. We all went to the village committee, where 3 official copies of the severance document were drawn up. My father pressed his thumbprint onto the paper, permanently cutting all legal and familial ties between his household and mine. I tucked our severance document into my pocket and returned home, well aware that the recent break-in was a clear wake-up call to earn money quickly and build a secure new house. That evening, my wife, Sun Wei Wei, expressed her guilt over the awkward situation at her parents' house, but I held her close and reassured her that she would never suffer under my family's hand again. After resting through the Lantern Festival, a string of sunny days arrived. Wei Wei prepared salted dried meat, mixed flour buns, and potato pancakes, while my friend Hu Zi brought rations and sorghum liquor. Together, we embarked on a 3-day expedition to explore the deep back mountain. Our old trap had collapsed under heavy snow, so we abandoned it and forged deeper into the snow-covered forest, marking trees along the way. Returning to our previously discovered cave, Huzi began chopping down birch trees to build a makeshift bed, while I scouted the surrounding area. Probing the bushes with my wooden spear, I felt something soft underneath. Clearing the snow, I found a hibernating green snake nestled in a rock crevice. I pinned the snake with my spear, and then made a remarkable discovery right next to it, a high-quality wild ginseng root. Using my machete, I carefully excavated the thick, valuable root, which can prolong life and replenish vital energy. After safely stowing the ginseng in my pocket, I finished off the snake and put it in my bag. Back at the cave, Huzi and I processed the timber and constructed a sturdy wooden bed. After a quick meal, we decided to explore the nearby woods rather than venture too far before dark. While searching near the bushes where I dug the ginseng, I tried throwing stones at a gray squirrel to harvest its pelt, but I missed and scared it off, wishing I had a slingshot or bow. Continuing northward, Huzi suddenly pointed out a large male wild boar roaming nearby. Wondering if larger predators had driven the wild boars outward, I raised my hunting rifle and instructed Huzi to stay alert, prepare to dodge its sharp fangs, and strike a decisive blow if my initial shot failed to bring it down. Raising my hunting rifle, I carefully approached the growling wild boar. Sensing our presence, the fast and powerful boar charged straight at me. I fired, but the shot only grazed its ear, enraging it further. In the chaos, I purposely dropped to the ground to find a better angle. Just as the boar was about to pounce, Huzi stepped in and slashed it deeply with his machete. Taking advantage of the pause, I fired 2 more shots, with the second bullet piercing its throat and killing it instantly. Because processing the boar near our cave would attract dangerous predators at night, we bled the carcass on the spot and covered the blood with snow. We then carried the meat back to the cave in 2 trips. After lighting a fire, we skewered the wild boar meat and roasted it over the flames, enjoying a warm dinner of roasted meat, salted dried meat, and sorghum liquor. To stay safe, Huzi and I took turns keeping watch over the fire throughout the night. The next morning, we toasted our flatbreads over the fire for breakfast. Before heading deeper into the back mountain, I warned Huzi to be extremely cautious, as wild boars roaming the outskirts suggested larger predators might be lurking inside. After an hour of walking, a strange noise echoed from afar. We quickly hid behind a rock and watched as a massive Siberian tiger chased down a deer. The tiger leaped, tackled the deer, and bit its neck, killing it instantly. I raised my rifle and fired at the tiger's head, but the bullet hit a tree trunk instead. Hearing the gun and spotting my weapon, the tiger roared, hesitated, and then suddenly turned and fled into the forest. Huzi was amazed and asked why the beast ran away. I explained that the tiger likely recognized the gun from past encounters with hunters. Realizing that the tiger was the true king of this mountain, I knew chasing it with limited firepower would be foolish. We had already secured a great harvest from this trip: a wild boar, a deer, a snake, and wild ginseng. Since my ammunition was running low, we decided to head down the mountain early and prepare to sell our haul in the county the next day, while also searching for a place to buy more bullets. After coming down the mountain, Huzi and I stored all our hunted game at my cave dwelling. Looking at the open space outside, I told him that I planned to build a protective courtyard wall in the spring, and he readily promised to help. Inside, my wife, Sun Weiwei, was making a quilt for Yi Yi. Surprised by our early return, she worried that she hadn't packed enough rations. I reassured her, explaining that we came back early because we had already secured a wild boar and a deer. Spotting a tear in my jacket from the hunt, she offered to mend it for me. I also confirmed that my father's family hadn't bothered her while I was away. Taking a live wild rabbit I caught on the way down, I headed to the village committee pig pen, where Uncle Chen Jixiang was tending the rabbit farm. I handed over the live female rabbit to breed with the male, suggesting we separate the newborn litters, line their pens with hay, and feed them corn kernels. When village chief Chen Jid arrived, I proposed a broader business plan. Once our rabbit farming expands, I will negotiate directly with the county, state-owned restaurant to supply them with rabbit meat under Chen Family Village's name. earning income and food coupons for all our villagers. By gifting the rabbit farming project and recipes to the village, I ensure no one can criticize me for keeping my private hunting game. Delighted by my foresight, the village chief gave me his full backing, promising the village's complete support. As I left the committee building, I ran into my brothers, Chen Shan and Chen Hai. Chen Shan was still limping from his broken leg, and both walked past me with gloomy expressions. Curious about their late visit motives, I slowed my pace to listen. They approached village chief Chen Zhaid, whose warm smile instantly vanished at the sight of them, as he coldly demanded to know what business they had with him. Outside the village committee office, my brothers Chen Shan and Chen Hai tried to ask village chief Chen Ji to lend them his hunting rifle so they could go hunting in the mountains. The village chief scoffed at their request, pointing out that with Chen Shan's broken limping leg and Chen Hai's weak frame, they would only get themselves killed by wild beasts. He firmly refused to lend them the gun, warning that no one would go up the mountain to save them except to recover their bones. Scared by his words, Chen Hai wanted to give up, but Chen Shan remained stubborn until the village chief yelled at them to leave. As they stepped outside, they caught me listening in. Chen Shan angrily asked if I stayed on purpose to watch them make fools of themselves. I smiled and admitted it directly. Furious, Chen Shan wanted to fight, but Chen Hai held him back, reminding him that they were no match for me. They walked away bitterly, and I headed home, knowing that hunting required real skill and that those who ignored good advice would eventually suffer. When I got back to our cave dwelling, my wife, Swan Weiwei, sat on the heated bed, mending the tears in my heavy cotton-padded coat from the recent hunt. She promised to remake the coat for me when spring arrived. I teased her playfully, making her blush in front of our daughter, Yi, before I stepped into the kitchen. Meanwhile, Chen Shan and Chen Hai returned home to face my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen. She learned the village chief refused to lend the rifle. She cursed the chief for being biased. Li Qinfen was desperate to get money because matchmaker Granny Wu found a bride for Chen Hai, but her family demanded a steep bride price of 5 yuan. Seething with frustration and needing a scapegoat for his humiliation, Chen Shan suddenly snapped. He tackled Chen Hai to the ground, punching him repeatedly in the face and stomach, blaming him for all their troubles. Despite my grandmother Zhang Guixiang and Li Qinfen trying to pull them apart, Chen Shan kept beating Chen Hai until he vented all his rage. Covered in bruises, Chen Hai begged for mercy and scrambled back to his room as soon as Chen Shan let him go. Back at the Chen house, my sister-in-law Li Qinfen scolded my brother Chen Shan for beating Chen Hai and incurring medical costs. When Chen Shan asked why they were so eager to find Chen Hai a wife, Li Qinfen explained her scheme. A hard-working wife like Sun Weiwei would earn valuable work points for their entire household. Chen Shan agreed and revealed that our grandmother held hidden gold nuggets from the past, though Li Qinfen worried gold was too dangerous to sell on the black market. Wanting to avoid risks, she planned to ask our grandmother for 5 yuan or borrow from her own parents. However, when Chen Shan threatened her with a divorce, Li Qinfen nervously promised to ask her family for the money the next day. At my home, I prepared bathwater in our large wooden tub and coaxed my daughter Yi Yi to sleep with a story. Afterwards, I joined Weiwei in the tub, and we shared a tender, intimate bath together. The next morning, Hu Zi knocked on the door early to head to the county black market. We packed half of our hunted wild boar meat, venison, and a green snake into our baskets, leaving the rest preserved in the cold outdoors. At the black market, a resourceful middleman named Li Shanghai set up a stall beside us. When I asked if he could source bullets for my hunting rifle, he admitted it was tricky, but promised to help for a fair price. We then set our meat prices at 80 cents a pound for pork and 60 cents for venison. Our high-quality meat sold quickly. Spotting a bag of Red Star milk powder at Li Shanghai's stall, I bought it at a small discount to give Yi Yi extra nutrition. In total, we brought 80 pounds of pork and 50 pounds of venison, earning 80 yuan plus various coupons. Following our agreed split, I took 80% of the cash and shared the rest and the coupons equally with Hu Zi. As we left the black market, Hu Zi insisted on treating me to lunch at Wuxiang state-owned restaurant to repay a past meal. Walking through a nearby alley, we overheard a commotion. The middleman we had just met, Li Shanghai, was surrounded by a gang of stick-wielding thugs who were trying to rob his goods and beat him up over an unpaid debt owed by their boss. Recognizing the gang leader as the same man I had beaten up on the second day of the Lunar New Year, I stepped in with Hu Zi to intervene. Just as the gang leader prepared to strike Li Shanghai, he looked up and recognized me. Terrified of another beating, he immediately called me Grandpa and apologized profusely, claiming he didn't know Li Shanghai was my friend. I gripped his shoulder firmly, ordering him and his men to get lost and leave Li Shanghai alone. The gang leader bowed, scolded his henchmen, and fled in a hurry. Grateful for the rescue, Li Shanghai picked up his fallen bicycle and introduced himself. He lived in Dan Village, right next to my home in Chen Family Village. Insisting on showing his gratitude, he dragged Hu Zi and me straight to Wuxiang state-owned restaurant for a big meal. Inside the restaurant, Zhou Lili was on shift. Seeing me enter, her co-workers teased her, but she reminded them that I was a married man and simply her savior. Still, she felt conflicted as she came over to take our order. Li Shanghai generously ordered braised pork, stir-fried green peppers with dried tofu, rice, steamed buns, and every other dish on the menu. While waiting for our food, Li Shanghai asked why the thugs were so afraid of me. And I casually explained that I had beaten them up when they harassed my family during the New Year holiday. Thinking of our village's rabbit farm, I asked Zhou Lili if we could speak in private. Outside, I asked if the restaurant accepted rabbit meat. She admitted they only bought small quantities occasionally because it was hard to sell. I then shared that our village was breeding rabbits and that my wife possessed 2 secret ancestral recipes for preparing delicious rabbit meat. I asked if she could arrange a meeting with her manager so Chen Family Village could supply processed rabbit meat directly to the state-owned restaurant. Zhou Lili agreed to help me speak with her restaurant manager about our village's rabbit supply idea, and I promised to treat her to dinner if the deal worked out. Returning to the table, I joked around with Li Shanghai and Hu Zi, keeping the mood lively. As we talked, I realized Li Shanghai possessed incredible business instincts. Since he owned a bicycle and had extensive connections across the county, he proposed taking a 10% cut to resell my hunted game directly on the black market. Agreeing that this arrangement would save me time and effort, I privately instructed him to pick up supplies at an abandoned temple near our village. We also agreed to transition to cured meats or other products once the weather warmed up to prevent spoilage. Our meal was abruptly interrupted when Zhang Hao barged into the restaurant with his crew, demanding to find me. Zhou Lili rushed out of the kitchen to stop him, but Zhang Hao arrogantly accused me of harassing her. I stood up calmly, dismissing his wild accusations, while Li Shanghai tried to step in and mediate. Zhang Hao spat toward Li Shanghai and refused to listen, so I called out his dirty mind and clarified that my interactions with Comrade Zhou were strictly about business for my family. Overwhelmed by embarrassment and anger, Zhou Lili burst into tears. She shouted at Zhang Hao that she had had enough of his constant harassment, then covered her face and ran out of the restaurant. Realizing he had made a mess, a panicked Zhang Hao uttered a quick threat toward me and chased after her. After they left, Li Shanghai quietly informed me that Zhang Hao was a local tyrant who caused trouble using his parents' senior positions. I thanked him for the warning, knowing I needed to act carefully while building up my own strength. Unfazed by the drama, the 3 of us went right back to enjoying our meal. At the restaurant, I tried to pay for our packed food, but the waiter informed me that Li Shanghai had already settled the bill for our entire table. Since Li Shanghai refused to accept any money, I decided to return the favor another time. After parting ways with him, Huzi and I headed back to Chen Family Village. On the road, we ran into my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, who had just managed to borrow 5 yuan from her parents. Seeing us, she muttered bitter comments about my spending habits. I raised my voice and casually mocked her, pointing out how much better my life was getting, which made her stomp her feet in anger while Huzi laughed. Back at our cave dwelling, I handed Sun Wei the packed food and a bag of Red Star milk powder for our daughter Yi Yi. When Yi Yi woke up from her nap, I picked her up and promised her a taste of the braised pork. Under the cover of darkness, Huzi and I met Li Shanghai at the ruined temple near his village to deliver our remaining meat and wild ginseng. Li Shanghai estimated the ginseng was worth 10 yuan and bought it directly from me. After taking his 10% cut for handling the sale, he handed over 67 yuan and 4 cents for the entire transaction. On our walk home, I told Huzi that we needed to start cutting trees immediately to build a yard wall around my property. I explained that building a wall now would allow us to smoke meat privately once the weather warmed up, preventing the meat from spoiling without drawing unwanted attention. The next morning, I borrowed an axe from the village chief, and Huzi and I set to work cutting down trees. After felling a tree, I found a hollow branch packed with walnuts, pine nuts, and peanuts stored by a squirrel. I gathered them up to share with Huzi as a snack. After cutting down 8 trees and hauling them to the foot of the mountain, we returned home exhausted and hungry for lunch. Wei Wei had cooked a table full of rich meat dishes. Just as Huzi and I stepped inside to eat, my third brother Chen Hai suddenly showed up at our door, staring greedily at our food. I stared back at him coldly and demanded to know why he was there. When my third brother, Chen Hai, invited me to a family reunion dinner for his upcoming wedding, I sarcastically reminded him that I had already severed ties with his family. As he tried to curse my friend Huzi humorously shut him down. Frustrated and unable to handle us, Chen Hai stormed off in anger, wondering how my poor family raised the money for his bride price. I knew they were just trying to squeeze money out of me, but their scheme failed. Back at the Chen house, my grandmother, Zhang Guixiang, slammed her fist on the table after hearing Chen Hai's report, furious that I refused to return for the wedding. Over the next 2 days, Huzi and I finished cutting trees and constructed a high, sturdy wooden wall around my courtyard. Meanwhile, Huzi managed to knock out 2 gray squirrels with stones and sold them to Li Shanghai. On Chen Hai's wedding day, many villagers gathered to watch the bride arrive, as no family could afford a proper banquet. Listening to the noise outside, my wife, Sun Weiwei, felt relieved that we had escaped that living hell. I didn't care about his wedding and focused on hunting instead. While exploring near the back mountain, Huzi and I spotted a group of wild boars, 3 adults and 2 piglets, driven out by the Siberian tiger. The next morning at dawn, we launched a swift attack. I shot the adult boars with my hunting rifle, while Huzi finished them off with a machete, and I managed to capture both live piglets with ropes. We finished the entire battle in just over 10 minutes. After carrying the 3 adult wild boars back to my yard in 3 trips, I brought the 2 live piglets to the village committee pig pen. Uncle Chen Jiqiang was completely stunned to see the wild piglets. I casually lied, telling him I found them lost while gathering firewood. Overjoyed by the discovery, Uncle Jiqiang immediately ran off to fetch the village chief to celebrate the great news. Uncle Chen Jiqiang brought village chief Chen Zijide over to inspect the 2 wild piglets I brought in. The village chief was thrilled, dreaming of expanding our livestock fold. Since Uncle Jiqiang's bad leg made heavy labor difficult, the village chief suggested my wife, Sun Weiwei, help manage the animals. I politely declined his offer for a full-time position, pointing out that cleaning pigsties was usually a punishment for lazy workers, and I didn't want outsiders gossiping about her. However, I agreed that she could offer guidance and advice. Back home, I sat with Weiwei on the heated bed to give her a crash course in pig farming. I explained proper swine care and tested her memory, which she answered perfectly. Delighted, I pulled her into my arms for a kiss, proud that she had mastered the material so quickly. Our moment was interrupted when Huzi burst into the house, breathlessly sharing juicy village gossip. He revealed that my brother Chen Hai's new bride was already pregnant before the wedding. I joked that Chen Hai got a buy one, get one free deal and became an instant father. Huzi added that the Chen family tried to break off the engagement, but the woman's family refused to return the bride price. Turning to business, Huzi reported that Li Shanghai was away, so he planned to check on him again tonight. We spent the morning butchering the 3 wild boars, reserving the ribs, trotters, and meat for sale, while keeping the pig offal for ourselves. Although people usually avoided pig offal due to its foul smell, I used my knowledge from my past life to thoroughly clean, blanch, and braise the organ meats with spices. As a rich aroma filled the kitchen, Wei Wei watched closely, eager to learn my recipe. Once it was ready, I brought a steaming plate of braised offal to the table and took a delicious bite, while Hu Zi stared nervously at the dish, hesitating to try it. Hu Zi was initially hesitant to try my braised pig offal, but after my wife, Sun Weiwei, tasted a piece and praised its delicious crunch, he tried it himself. He immediately fell in love with the flavor and ate heartily. I promised to let him take some home and pack a bowl for Li Shanghai. Our meal was interrupted when a villager shouted at our gate that village chief Chen Zhide needed me at the Chen family's courtyard. Knowing my father's family only brought trouble, I went anyway, accompanied by Hu Zi. As soon as I walked in, my grandmother Zhang Guixiang started cursing at me, accusing me of sleeping with my third brother's new bride and getting her pregnant, demanding that the villagers drag me to the police station. Influenced by her dramatic scene, the surrounding villagers began shouting insults at me. The village chief explained that the new bride, Yang Xiaodi, claimed the child belonged to someone named Yuan. I scoffed at the ridiculous charge, as I didn't even know who Chen Hai was marrying. I confronted Yang Xiaodi directly, asking if she even recognized me or could name when this supposedly happened. She stammered that it was a month ago. Hu Zi immediately shut that down, pointing out that a month ago, I was winter fishing with him. I then asked village chief Chen Zhide where her family lived. He confirmed she was from Shuangyang village in the neighboring Hongqi commune. I pointed out the absurdity to the entire crowd. Her village was over a 4-hour walk one way, taking 8 hours round trip. Why would I, a married man who had just split from my family and was struggling to survive, walk 8 hours to seek out a complete stranger? Realizing they had been led astray by my grandmother's wild assumptions, the villagers quickly turned on the Chen family, apologizing to me for wrongfully judging me. Overwhelmed by anger and shame, my grandmother fainted on the spot. As my brother Chen Shan carried her inside, he arrogantly stepped out to demand medical money from me, blaming me for her fainting. I shot him down instantly, pointing out that she was the one cursing me the moment I arrived, and reminding him that we had officially severed all ties. Leaving them in a state of chaotic embarrassment, I walked out with Hu Zi to finish my lunch, while Hu Zi intentionally spat on Chen Hai's pants on our way out. On the way back from the Chen family's courtyard, Hu Zi praised me for shutting down my grandmother's false accusations. That afternoon, we headed up the mountain again. Using my wooden spear, I dug up Loess clay, explaining to a confused Huz that we needed it to make mud bricks for a building project. We hauled the Loess back in 2 trips and mixed it with water from the reservoir. To strengthen the mud bricks against rain, I stirred in dry straw. I built simple wooden molds to shape the long clay strips and braced them with stones so they would dry straight without warping. When Huzis saw the pile of drying bricks, he panicked, thinking just the 2 of us were going to construct a whole house. I laughed and clarified that I was only building a 2-walled smokehouse to cure meat with fire below. I added that once I earned enough money, I definitely planned to build a real red brick house for my family. Relieved, Hu Zi set off to check if Li Shanghai was back so we could deliver our meat and request more salt. Left alone, I picked a spot near the reservoir for the smokehouse and envisioned adding a backyard and winter vegetable greenhouse in the future. Meanwhile, back at the Chen house, the crowd had scattered. My third brother, Chen Hai, told his sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, that he didn't want to marry a woman pregnant with someone else's child. Li Qinfen shut him down, reminding him that his reputation as a thief made it impossible to find anyone else, and at least the child would carry the Chen surname. She vowed to demand a refund from matchmaker Granny Wu, while ordering Chen Hai to accept his fate. In his room, Chen Hai found his new bride, Yang Xiaodi, crying. Desperate to stay in the family to escape her abusive father who sold her for 5 yuan, she knelt, begged for mercy, and promised to give the baby away after birth. Chen Hai felt a pang of pity and pulled her up. He warned her to obey Li Qinfen, avoid provoking me because I was a madman, and never cheat on him again. Before she could process his words, Li Qinfen's voice bellowed from the courtyard, ordering her to get out of bed and cook dinner for the entire household. At dusk, Huzi returned and informed me that Li Shanghai was waiting at the ruined temple. Before we set off with the wild boar meat, my wife, Sun Weiwei, ran out to hand me a bowl of braised pig offal. I teased her gently, making her blush, and then Huzi and I delivered the haul. Li Shanghai helped us weigh the meat, paying me 240 yuan. I also bought extra salt to preserve the 100 pounds of wild boar meat I kept for smoking, and I asked him to secure 50 or 60 rifle bullets at 15 cents each. On her weekend break, Zhou Lili rode her bicycle to Chen family village, after her manager agreed to discuss a supply deal for our village's rabbits. However, at the village entrance, my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, stopped her. Li Qinfen falsely claimed to be my close sister-in-law and tried to pry into her business, worried I might land a city job. Zhou Lili simply asked her to pass along a message that the state-owned restaurant manager was looking for me. Before leaving, she witnessed Li Qinfen physically assault her new sister-in-law, Yang Zhaodi, over a ruined meal, prompting Zhou Lili to quickly excuse herself. Meanwhile, back at home, I was making progress on drying my mud bricks and salting the pork. Deciding to buy soybeans to make soybean paste, I headed into the county town with Huzi. At the black market, I purchased 10 caddies of soybeans, along with rice, flour, cooking oil, and fresh vegetables for my family. After finishing our errands, Huz offered to buy a bottle of wine so we could celebrate. But I declined, inviting him over to my house instead for my wife's home-cooked barbecue. I then walked over to Wuxiang state-owned restaurant to follow up on the rabbit supply proposal. Right at the entrance, I ran into Zhou Lili, who greeted me with delight and asked if I was there to eat. At the Wuxiang state-owned restaurant, Zhou Lili invited me inside, but I declined since I wasn't there to eat. She mentioned that her manager was away for training until the day after tomorrow and asked if my sister-in-law had passed along her message. I was shocked to learn that Zhou Lili had visited Chen family village and spoken to Li Qinfen. Realizing what happened, my face turned dark. Since I had long separated from my family, Li Qinfen undoubtedly hid the message, assuming the state-owned restaurant was offering me a job and trying to ruin my opportunity. Zhou Lili apologized profusely, but I reassured her it wasn't her fault, promising to return in 2 days once her manager came back. When I met up with Huzi, he was furious to hear that Li Qinfen had deliberately hidden the news about our village's rabbit breeding partnership. We rushed back to Chen family village, where I handed our purchases to Huzi and asked him to deliver them to my wife, Sun Weiwei, so she wouldn't worry. First, I visited Uncle Chen Zhiqiang and explained the situation. Enraged, he grabbed his cane to fight, but I stopped him, insisting we needed a plan to trap Li Qinfen into confessing. We then went to village chief Chen Zhai's home. Hearing how Li Qinfen nearly ruined a village-wide business deal, the village chief almost fainted from anger. I shared my psychological warfare plan. I would go to the Chen house and confront Li Qinfen directly. Then, the village chief and Uncle Zhiqiang would arrive, claiming a severe official notice had been issued regarding the delayed project, threatening that the responsible party would face harsh legal punishment. Terrified, she would either confess and be fined and forced to clean our pigsties, or face the exaggerated consequences. Meanwhile, Huzi delivered the goods to my wife. Although Weiwei was anxious, she patiently waited for my return. I marched over to the Chen family residence and kicked their door open in feigned fury, startling the entire household. Li Qinfen rushed out cursing, but I sneered and accused her of sabotaging everyone's plans. Though secretly nervous that her scheme was exposed, Li Qinfen stubbornly tried to play dumb, confidently claiming she had done nothing wrong as a crowd of curious villagers began to gather. At the Chen family's residence, a large crowd gathered to see what was happening. Village Chief Chen Zhai and Uncle Chen Zhiqiang arrived with grim expressions. The village chief announced to the furious crowd that someone had maliciously hidden the news about our village's partnership with the state-owned restaurant, causing us to lose the contract to another village. He warned that whoever held back the community's progress would face severe legal punishment, though he offered a lighter punishment if the culprit confessed before nightfall. To make the threat even scarier, I added that an investigation was already underway at the state-owned restaurant, and that the culprit could face years in prison once proven guilty. I also suggested guarding the village entrance to stop anyone from fleeing. My sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, turned pale and nearly collapsed from fear. My brother, Chen Shan, worried her actions would ruin the family and urged her to confess immediately. Panicked that she would be arrested, Li Qinfen went to the village committee office to find the village chief. Unbeknownst to her, I had already gathered respected village elders inside to act as hidden witnesses. Under the light of a kerosene lamp, Li Qinfen tearfully confessed everything she had done to the village chief. Furious, Chen Jide berated her for sabotaging the collective. I then called for the hidden elders to step out. Shocked and completely dumbfounded, Li Qinfen looked on as the elders emerged, ready to record every detail of her confession. Hu Zi ran through the village, banging an iron ladle against a basin, shouting for everyone to gather at the village committee office. The curious villagers rushed over carrying torches, illuminating the area where Li Qinfen sat slumped on the ground in total despair. Realizing she had fallen into my trap, she glared at me with pure hatred, but I remained silent until the entire crowd assembled. Once everyone arrived, the respected elders I had hidden earlier stepped forward and recounted Li Qinfen's full confession. Furious, the villagers exploded with rage, cursing her for dragging down the entire collective. When Li Qinfen panicked and tried to attack me, I kicked her away. Desperate to justify herself, she claimed she only wanted to stop me from getting a city job through Zhou Lili, whom she called a vixen. Before she could finish, Uncle Chen Jiqiang accidentally dumped a bucket of foul pig manure sewage right over her head, making her vomit while the crowd backed away in disgust. Village Chief Chen Jide delivered her punishment. Li Qinfen was ordered to move into the pigsty, sweep it every single day, and clean up the mess at the village committee before going to sleep. Seeing the villagers heartbroken over losing the state-owned restaurant contract, I stepped forward and revealed the truth. I reassured everyone that the deal was never canceled. The village chief and I had simply staged the lie to lure the culprit into confessing. Relieved, the villagers cheered, placing all the blame on Li Qinfen. After the crowd dispersed, Li Qinfen washed the courtyard well until late at night. Covered in a lingering stench, she finally walked back to the Chen family house, only to find the gate locked. My brother, Chen Shan, came out, frowned in disgust, and threw her luggage into the dirt, announcing that our grandmother refused to let her back in. Shocked and devastated, Li Qinfen screamed at Chen Shan for abandoning her after everything she had done for him. Since the Chen family refused to open the door, Li Qinfen had no choice but to sleep in the pigsty's hay shed at the village committee to avoid freezing outside. When I returned home, I found my wife, Sun Weiwei, waiting for me at the door in the cold. Touched and concerned, I pulled her cold hands into my pocket and embraced her. Since I was hungry, she quickly prepared a hot bowl of dumpling soup for me and soaked the soybeans for making soybean paste the next day. To solve the problem of needing a sauce vat, I promised to ask Hu Zi if we could use one of his family's old brewing vats. The next morning, I checked on my mud bricks and saw they were nearly dry. I went to fetch Hu Zi to help me build our smokehouse. On the way, I ran into Li Qinfen carrying a bucket of pig manure. She glared at me with intense hatred and looked as if she wanted to dump the manure on me. I calmly warned her that if she caused trouble, I would apply to have her sent to sweep manure at a far-off farm. Startled, her hand slipped, splashing manure water over her own pants before she slunk away in frustration. At Hu Zi's house, I tricked him into getting exercise by carrying heavy mud bricks for our smokehouse construction. When he felt tricked, I motivated him by promising a barbecue meal, and together we quickly finished building one of the mud walls. Village Chief Chen Shi dropped by to share good news. The commune agreed to give our village 2 more piglets once they were weaned in 2 days, and he wanted Hu Zi and me to collect them. Since I was going to the county the next day to meet the state-owned restaurant manager, I persuaded the village chief and accountant Shu to come along, so our village cadre was represented. That afternoon, after finishing the smokehouse wall, I took Weiwei to the village committee pig pen. Uncle Chen Jiqiang welcomed us warmly and let us select 2 rabbits to bring to the county, giving Weiwei the perfect opportunity to showcase her cooking talents for tomorrow's business meeting. At the village committee pig pen, I inspected the wild rabbits and advised Uncle Chen Jiqiang to breed our newest female rabbit with the old male. Following my instructions, my wife, Sun Weiwei, naturally directed my sister-in-law, Li Qinfen, to thoroughly clean the dirty pigsty. Seeing Li Qinfen forced to do heavy labor under my wife's supervision was a satisfying turn of events after years of her mistreating Weiwei. After the cleanup, I personally selected 2 healthy male rabbits for our upcoming trip to the county and stored them in a separate room, unaware that a spiteful Li Qinfen was secretly plotting to ruin them. That evening, I built a temporary grill inside our new smokehouse using yellow mud bricks. Weiwei skewered meat onto willow branches, and Huzi brought over a bowl of farmhouse soybean paste. After teaching Weiwei how to grill over charcoal, I sent Huzi to deliver fresh skewers to Aunt Chunhua and Uncle Jiqiang. I also instructed Weiwei that if our county deal succeeded, she should teach them her signature spicy rabbit dish while I sold them my recipe for braised rabbit. Later, Huzi and I drank together until he was tipsy, and I helped him home. At dawn the next morning, village chief Chen Zhaid knocked frantically on my gate with terrible news. The 2 rabbits I selected yesterday were found dead and frozen solid in their room, while all the other rabbits in the main pen remained perfectly fine. I suspect this was man-made, especially since Li Qinfen is the only one living in the pig pen area. I reassured the panicked village chief that we could simply select 2 new live rabbits to bring along. We rushed to the village committee, where Uncle Jiqiang and Accountant Shu were deeply upset. Examining the dead rabbits, I found no external wounds. Since a rabbit's ears are its most vulnerable spot, I realized someone must have improperly handled or intentionally killed them overnight. Huzi mentioned seeing Li Qinfen acting suspiciously by the well the night before, but without proof, we couldn't arrest her for killing the rabbits. With time short, I picked 2 replacement rabbits from our healthy stock and set off for the county with my family, Huzi and village chief Chen Shi, while Accountant Shu stayed behind with Uncle Jiqiang to investigate. At the Wuxiang state-owned restaurant, Zhou Lili greeted us warmly and ushered us into the back to meet manager Ji Fuchun. Observing his plump frame, I greeted him politely. I showed him our plump rabbits, but manager Ji was far more interested in our secret family recipes. When he asked for the recipe up front, I firmly insisted that we would only teach them 1 free cooking method after signing a supply contract for our village's rabbits. However, to prove our worth, I offered to let my wife cook a dish right then for a tasting. I also insisted that the restaurant's kitchen staff step outside to protect our secret recipe. Manager Ji tried to leave a cook behind to help, but I politely refused. Once inside the kitchen, I slaughtered and skinned a rabbit while my wife, Sun Weiwei, chopped it into small cubes. Following the steps I taught her and utilizing the restaurant's extra seasonings, she skillfully whipped up a plate of bright red, aromatic spicy rabbit. The mouth-watering aroma filled the restaurant, and Zhou Lili handed out chopsticks. Even the dismissive head chef was completely blown away, praising the spicy, flavorful meat and crispy chilies. Manager Ji tried to remain composed, but he couldn't stop himself from eating piece after piece. When I asked for his opinion on our spicy rabbit, he awkwardly set down his chopsticks and tried to downplay its quality, complaining that the dish used too much expensive oil. When manager Ji Fuchun complained that our spicy rabbit dish used too much expensive oil, the chef checked the kitchen and confirmed we actually used less oil than standard dishes. My wife, Sun Weiwei, then brought out our second dish, braised rabbit skewered and roasted with her secret savory sauce. The head chef ate a skewer and praised its crispy exterior, tender meat, and incredible flavor. Even manager Ji ate a skewer and was moved to tears by how delicious it was. I deliberately distributed the remaining skewers to everyone present, so manager Ji couldn't save any to analyze or replicate the recipe. I explained that, while I wouldn't teach them the secret roasted rabbit recipe, our dishes could easily outshine the competing restaurant across the street. Manager Ji claimed he needed 2 days to consider the partnership, hoping his chef could recreate the flavors in the meantime. Confident in our unique ancestral recipes, I agreed to wait 2 days for his answer. Before we left, Manager G bought our remaining live rabbit for 1 yuan and 80 cents. I had him give the money directly to village chief Chen Jade, who was thrilled by the profit. As we walked away, Zhou Lili chased after us to offer encouragement. I thanked her politely, letting nature take its course. Village chief Chen Jade quickly realized she had feelings for me, but I remained completely faithful to Wei Wei. We then visited the supply and marketing cooperative, where I bought extra salt, potatoes, and radishes. My 4-year-old daughter, Yi Yi, stared curiously at the pens and notebooks behind the counter. When I asked if she wanted to learn to write, she happily nodded. Knowing that Hu Zi's educated grandmother used to attend a private school, I decided I would ask her to tutor Yi Yi, and I proudly bought my daughter her very first notebooks and pencils. After buying 2 notebooks and pencils for my daughter Yi Yi at the supply and marketing cooperative, our group headed back to Chen Family Village. On the way, I privately agreed with village chief Chen Jide that if our deal succeeded, we would tell the villagers that the recipe for spicy rabbit was gifted for free to the collective, while keeping my secret braised rabbit recipe for my own private business. At the village entrance, accountant Xu Guoqiang met us anxiously. The village chief proudly handed him the 1 yuan and 80 cents earned from selling 1 rabbit to the state-owned restaurant. When I asked if they had found who killed the 2 rabbits, accountant Xu admitted that he and Uncle Chen Jiqiang found no clues all morning. We walked to the village committee pig pen to investigate and ran into my nephew, Chen Guangtao, carrying a bowl of sweet potato porridge for his mother, Li Qinfen. Observing his greasy lips and Li Qinfen's nervous hesitation to eat her porridge, I suspected she was hiding something. I teased her about eating meat, causing her to freak out and angrily deny touching the rabbits. Ignoring her outbursts, I decided to count the remaining live rabbits in the pig pen. Accounting for the 2 that died, and the 2 we brought to the county, there should have been 7 rabbits left out of 11. But I found only 6. 1 rabbit was completely missing. Realizing someone had stolen public property, I deduced that Li Qinfen had secretly eaten the missing rabbit and sent Chen Guangtao home to dispose of the evidence. I quickly went with village chief Chen Jide to fetch his dog, a Huang, to track down the scent. I brought a Huang into the hay shed where Li Qinfen was frantically rearranging her bedding. I ordered a Huang to find the bones. The dog sniffed the food bowl, trotted directly over to Li Qinfen, and began whining while vigorously scratching at her blanket with its paws. At the village committee, my sister-in-law Li Qinfen tried to hit village chief Chen Jide's dog, a Huang, to cover her tracks. Fortunately, Aunt Chunhua stepped in, grabbed Li Qinfen's hair, and pulled off her blanket, exposing several ash-covered rabbit bones hidden underneath. Aunt Chunhua pinned the screaming Li Qinfen to the ground and beat her while the crowd watched. Leaving Aunt Chunhua in charge, I took a Huang, Huzi, and the village chief to search the main Chen family house. When my 3rd brother, Chen Hai, saw us coming, he panicked, but my grandmother Zhang Guishang assured him that since they had already eaten the meat and burnt the bones in the stove, no one could prove anything. I kicked open the courtyard gate and led A Huang straight into the kitchen. While 2 burly villagers blocked the Chen family at the doorway, I searched the stove pit with a fire poker and uncovered the buried rabbit bones hidden beneath the ashes. Seeing the evidence, I instructed Huzi to run back to the village committee and trick Li Qinfen by telling her that the Chen family had already blamed the entire theft on her. Huzi immediately got the message and ran off to fetch her, while I stepped outside, holding the charred bones, and sarcastically thanked my grandmother, claiming Li Qinfen had already confessed. Infuriated by the perceived betrayal, Li Qinfen burst into the courtyard like a mad dog. She and my grandmother immediately lunged at each other, trading slaps and insults, while the villagers forcibly separated them. As they cursed each other, Li Qinfen exposed the full truth in her rage. She revealed that it was my brother, Chen Shan, who had ordered her to steal the rabbit for the family in the first place, because they were starving for meat. Exposed and humiliated before the entire village, a dark-faced Chen Shan snapped. He rushed forward, grabbed Li Qinfen firmly by the neck, and hit her repeatedly, choking out her breath as she desperately gasped for help. To keep Chen Shan from beating Li Qinfen to death, Village chief Chen Jide had villagers pull him back. Desperate, Li Chenfen knelt and begged the village chief for mercy, claiming Chen Shan forced her to steal the rabbit for food. Chen Shan grabbed a stick and roared back, accusing her of killing the other 2 rabbits out of pure spite, because she couldn't stand that I went to the county to negotiate a deal. The watching villagers erupted in anger, demanding severe punishment. Village chief Chen Jide delivered the verdict. Li Chenfen was sentenced to a year of hard labor at Hongxing Farm, while Chen Shan was ordered to clean the village pigsty in her place. My grandmother, Zhang Guishang, tried to get Chen Shan out of pigsty duty, prompting me to ask if she planned to make my 3rd brother, Chen Hai, take the fall instead. Angered by her lifelong favoritism, Chen Hai exploded at our grandmother, shouting that he wouldn't do Chen Shan's punishment, especially after being forced into marrying a woman pregnant with another man's child. As the 2 brothers prepared to fight, village chief Chen Jide threatened to send them both to the farm. I stepped forward and offered a practical solution. Chen Shan would clean the pigsty on odd-numbered days, and Chen Hai would clean it on even-numbered days. The village chief immediately adopted my idea and warned that anyone slacking off would be sent straight to the police station for stealing public property. This finally silenced my grandmother, and the village chief sent the report to the commune overnight. That evening, I guided my wife Sun Weiwei as she fried hot dough twists. Taking a plate of fresh dough twists, I brought my 4-year-old daughter, Yi Yi, to Hu Zi's house to meet his 70-year-old grandmother, Feng Alien. When the old lady kindly offered a hug, Yi Yi hid behind me shyly. I gently encouraged my daughter to step forward with confidence and embrace her new teacher. My daughter Yi Yi hugged Grandma Feng Alien's leg, instantly winning the 70-year-old woman's heart. I handed over the fresh dough twists my wife Sun Weiwei had fried. Although Grandma Feng felt hesitant to accept such a valuable treat, I explained that I wanted to ask a favor. Yi Yi sweetly announced that she wanted to learn, and I asked Grandma Feng if she would provide my 4-year-old daughter with early education since she was too young for primary school. Delighted by Yi Yi's presence, Grandma Feng happily agreed. After promising to bring Yi Yi back with her notebooks and pencils the next day, I took my daughter home. Meanwhile, Zhang Hao returned to the county town from the city and heard that Zhou Li had visited me in Chen family village and that I later brought my family to see her at the restaurant. Jealous and unable to sleep, he waited outside Wuxiang state-owned restaurant before opening. When Zhou Li arrived, Zhang Hao acted spitefully, declaring he would sit in the restaurant every day to watch her. Inside the kitchen, the chef struggled to replicate my spicy rabbit and secret braised rabbit sauce, managing only a poor imitation. Because manager Ji Fuchun had promised him a raise if he cracked the recipe, the chef felt deeply stressed as the deadline arrived. Realizing the secret recipe could not be copied, manager Ji gave up and decided to accept my offer. He sent a waiter on a bicycle to Chen family village to deliver the message. At the village entrance, Aunt He Chunhua and the local women intercepted the arrogant restaurant waiter. The waiter casually announced that manager Ji had agreed to the deal and wanted me to come sign the contract tomorrow before riding off quickly. Ignoring the waiter's condescending attitude, Aunt Chunhua rushed to inform village chief Chen Ji at the village committee. Overjoyed by the great news, the village chief immediately set off with Aunt Chunhua to tell me, just as I was in the kitchen calculating the days left, to begin smoking my cured meat. Village chief Chen Ji and Aunt He Chunhua came to my house with great news. Wuxiang state-owned restaurant agreed to sign the contract tomorrow. I was not surprised at all, as I knew their head chef could not replicate my family recipes. Meanwhile, at Wuxiang state-owned restaurant, the dejected chef sat outside smoking. Zhang Hao, who was idling nearby, joined him. Finding out that the chef failed to copy my recipes, Zhang Hao was furious to realize I was working with the restaurant. He believed I was using the business deal as an excuse to get close to Zhou Li. Determined to stop me, Zhang Hao stormed into the office of manager Ji Fuchun, who happens to be his cousin's relative. Zhang Hao demanded that the manager cancel the deal with me. When Ji Fuchun explained that he needed my dishes to win an upcoming restaurant award against their rival, state-owned restaurant, Zhang Hao promised that his mother would use her influence to secure the award for Jifu-chun anyway. Reassured by this promise, Jifu-chun agreed to reject our contract when we arrived the next day. Early the next morning, I went to the village committee pig pen with 2 processed rabbits and 1 live rabbit. Uncle Chen Jiqing noticed that one of our female rabbits was pregnant and carefully moved her to a clean, separate pen. Today was my brother Chen Shan's turn to clean the pigsty. As he complained about the extra work, Uncle Jiqiang scolded him fiercely, and I openly laughed at his misery. My brother has done more hard labor in the past 2 days than he did in his entire life. Soon, village chief Chen Jid arrived, and my wife, Sun Weiwei, joined us after leaving our daughter Yi Yi safely at Grandma Feng Alien's home. Since Accountant Shu stayed behind due to an upset stomach, the 3 of us packed our things and set off for the county, ready to sign the official contract. When my group arrived at Wuxiang's state-owned restaurant, Zhang Hao was waiting at the door, smirking mockingly. I casually shut down his attitude before walking inside. Zhou Lili greeted us with surprise, asking why we were there. When I explained that manager Ji Fu-chun had invited us to sign our contract, she revealed that the manager had already canceled the deal. Manager Ji then stepped out of his office, offering a fake apology and claiming it was too late to inform us. Yesterday, before coldly brushing past me, Huzi lost his temper over their dishonesty, but I held him back. Knowing Zhang Hao was behind this betrayal, I told manager Ji that we would not waste our time with untrustworthy people, and I led my group out. Village Chief Chen Ji was deeply disheartened, but I reassured him that Wuxiang wasn't the only restaurant in the county. I decided to try our luck diagonally across the street at Ayman's state-owned restaurant. Unlike the other restaurant, Ayman was larger, and the waiter immediately brought out manager Fang Wood. I introduced myself, explained our village's rabbit-raising operation, and promised to teach them our family's secret recipes for free if they agreed to partner with us. Intrigued, Manager Fang granted us access to the kitchen. With my help at the stove, my wife, Sun Weiwei, cooked our signature spicy rabbit. Manager Fang and his staff tasted it and were instantly blown away by the crisp chilies and rich flavor. The chef even verified that the dish used very little oil. I candidly told Manager Fang that Wuxiang had just broken their promise to us, and that we refused to work with untrustworthy partners. Weiwei then brought out our second dish, braised rabbit meat in soy sauce. As everyone tasted the rich, savory skewers, they praised the flavor enthusiastically, recognizing that these dishes would be perfect for entertaining visiting provincial leaders. Manager Fang excitedly decided to sign a contract with us on the spot. He extended his hand, and I introduced myself and our village chief, Chen Jide. Manager Fang Wood shook hands with village chief Chen Jide, praising him for cultivating such outstanding talent in our village. He then led us into his office to finalize the contract details. I explained that while I was willing to teach them the spicy rabbit recipe for free as part of our supply partnership, the exclusive buyout rights for my secret braised rabbit sauce would cost 500 yuan. Manager Fang hesitated at the steep price, but I pointed out that owning the unique, authentic recipe would make Ayman's state-owned restaurant stand out from all competitors, especially for entertaining visiting provincial leaders. Gritting his teeth, Manager Fang agreed, paid me 500 yuan in cash, and signed the contract. I promised that my wife, Sun Weiwei, would teach his head chef, Dali, right away. In the kitchen, Sun Weiwei demonstrated the spicy rabbit dish, and Dali successfully replicated it. I handed Manager Fang the handwritten secret sauce recipe along with our remaining rabbit meat for practice. On our walk home, I took 100 yuan from my earnings and tried to give it to village chief Chen Jide. When he tried to decline, insisting I save it to build a new house, I stuffed the money into his hands and asked him to use it to establish a primary school in our village. I explained that I didn't want my daughter Yi Yi and other local children to make the long, dangerous trek across the river to attend school in the neighboring village. Deeply moved, the village chief choked up and promised to discuss the school plans with Accountant Xu immediately. When we arrived back at Chen Family Village, an anxious crowd of villagers gathered at the entrance to hear the outcome. Village Chief Chen Jide. announced that our partnership with the state-owned restaurant was officially finalized, clearing the way for us to expand our rabbit farming. Overjoyed, the villagers cheered, praising me as the greatest contributor to our village's bright future.